Is that on? Right, good start. Welcome to this full council meeting, everyone. Item 1, announcements by myself and the Chief Executive. I've got a few announcements. I'd just like to thank councillors for sorting out a few mayoral engagements for me. Thank you very much for that. And if you can find any more, that'd be good. The diary is still not full. Also, a reminder, civic dinner on the 5th of October. Anyone who would still like to come, I can guarantee some good food and a great speaker. Anybody who's interested in rugby league will enjoy the speaker, but I'm not going to say who it is. And the third point is, well, actually, I'll come to that next. I just want to advise that at some point there'll be a 10-minute break when we feel that it's relevant, probably when we've melted on the stage. But, you know, don't wait to go to the restroom. If you need to go to the restroom, do. If you need a drink, there are drinks at the back. There are drinks outside here, under here. But just remember, if you're moving about the room, to respect anybody that's speaking. Try and be quiet as you can anyway. And if you want to vote, to return to your seats in good time. Okay, my final point is tributes to former Councillor Tim Crowther. So I welcome any tributes from the floor. Councillor Pando.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Many of you may know Councillor Tim Crowther. Some of you may not know him. But I knew Tim as a Hickham White councillor. He was on this council, and he was probably one of the youngest councillors when he was on the council. He was a very genuine bloke, very conscientious bloke. And after he stood down from the council, I also got to know him because he was a teacher at Hickham White Grammar School. And both my older children, who are now both adults, told me about the news, which I already knew. And they told me that he was a very good teacher. He listened. He had a sense of humour. You know, it's good to see that it's not just remembered in political circles, but a lot of the younger generations, certainly in Batley and Spen, will know him and will remember him as somebody who was a genuinely nice guy and a good teacher. So, you know, my heart goes out to his family, his friends, and everybody he knew. I'm sure there'll be the councillors that may want to speak after me, but also to all the young people, the young adults who will share our loss. My heart goes out to all the people that he knew. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Any more speakers? Councillor Lukic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm one of those young people who was also at Hickham White Grammar School at the time that Tim Crowther was teaching there, and I certainly remember him as someone with a brilliant personality, encouraged all the young people at the school to excel, to make the most of their talents. I just want to express my condolences to his family.
Thank you, Councillor Lukic. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It came as a great shock to me hearing the news about Tim, because I was one of the people who served on the council from '98 when Tim was on. And as has been said, he was a very young councillor, a very able person. He was chair of the Culture and Leisure Services Committee, one of the first committees I was put on. And condolences and best wishes have also been expressed through John Fletcher, who was involved in that when I was speaking to John recently. Tim was not only very able, but he was very accommodating. Again, as a young councillor, strangely enough, one of the first things I was trying to do was to encourage cycling in this council. And we brought forward a motion. And at that time, I think on a 72-person council, Labour had 42 seats. And John Harmon, as he was then, turned around to Tim and said, "What do you think about this?" And Tim said, "We should support it. It's not doing anything wrong, and we shouldn't just be seen to stamp on things." He was in favour of sustainable transport. Coming from Heckmondwike, he used to pick me up as he came past our house for meetings. Again, something not many often do. And one thing which we must pay tribute to is that Tim was a person and a politician of honest principles and high character. On falling out with the Labour group, he didn't, as many others in national, local and other politics have done, retain his seat and be criticised for having resigned from a party. He resigned from the council and triggered a by-election. He lost that by-election, but it was his principles he put to the test. And I think, Mr. Mayor, that's something that we should always remember, that Tim, and it's something I think the council needs to remember as well and look at when we come to things, is we talk about health, mental health and well-being. And evermore, that's something that we need to bear in mind, that you never know who is suffering from any of those things. I'm pleased to have known Tim Crowther in many, many capacities, and my deep condolence to his family and friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Steve Hall.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was hoping today to be able to tell you about a date for Tim's funeral, but I can't. Due to circumstances of how he passed away, it's still being investigated. The annoying thing is, Tim, he only lives 100 yards from where I live. I used to see him at least twice a day when he was going on his little registered shop. Tim got on to council in '98. My last year, were on with me and David, so that's why I was a really good councillor, because he'd great coaching from me and David shared. Martin's just touched on something. I didn't know that Tim was hiding a problem, and that problem was his mental health, which were pretty bad. He'd just been in a home at Halifax for 5 weeks, where they were taking care of him. He'd other issues. He's no family. He's only got his mum. His mum's in a care home. She's got dementia. She don't know who he is. So, all in all, with what Tim eventually did, I think a lot of people should have seen it coming, but the thing is, he hid it that bloody well. You can't tell. So, I'm sorry he's done what he's done. I used to have a laugh and a joke with him. He used to come into our house and basically have a bit of a weep at the situation that he was in with his mother, because he was caring for her for the last 8 years. So when I do hear anything at all about a funeral, because obviously there won't be that many people going, as he's only got a mother who's a family member, I will let you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Anyone else like to express? Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have known Tim Crowther for a very long time. Tim lived very close to my house, and I used to see him walking after he left the council, going for his daily walk, and I used to bump into him and catch up on what was going on and have discussions about trying to put the world's problems to rights. And I think I got a feeling that something had changed about Tim, and it was only when I found out that this has happened that Tim's no longer with us, and the circumstances surrounding his death have highlighted that actually mental health problems can affect anybody, and sometimes by looking at somebody's exterior, you can't tell what demons they're facing, and their own personal problems. And I think that should be a wake-up call for everyone, that can happen to anybody, however they are. So my condolences to his friends, family, and to everybody that knew him, and may his soul rest in peace. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Butt. Anyone else? In that case, can I please just express my condolences to Tim's family? It's a very sad thing. We move on to announcements by the Chief Executive, and we've got Rachel standing in for Jackie.
Thank you. After conversation with the Mayor and all group leaders, Councillor Patterson will now make a statement with regards to Afghanistan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak. I just want to speak briefly about the concerning situation in Afghanistan and make Kirklees Council's role in helping those affected perfectly clear. I'd like to thank the Mayor and all members for allowing me the time to speak about such an important issue today. Firstly, and most importantly, Kirklees is a place of welcome, and we have a very proud history when it comes to supporting asylum seekers. We have been part of the Asylum Seeker Dispersal Programme since 2000 and have welcomed and supported those in desperate need of safety through this scheme for the last 21 years. As always, we are also ready to support any humanitarian response to the situation in Afghanistan. It's right that we can offer those at risk a place of safety until they find something more permanent. The current situation is of great concern, and my thoughts, and I'm sure yours, are with all of those impacted by it. People have lost their lives, others are living in fear, and those fleeing Afghanistan for safety face uprooting their whole lives and moving to a strange new country with the challenges of adjusting to a completely new life. We have to play our part in helping them. This is a complex picture which is moving very quickly, and we know that this can lead to a lot of misinformation around who is coming to Kirklees and where. So today I just want to clear a few things up. There are two different programs to support people coming from Afghanistan. There was an existing program which was a scheme to move people out of Afghanistan who worked alongside the armed forces and their lives were seen to be at serious risk. We were already supporting people through this scheme in Kirklees. The second scheme, which we don't know an awful lot of detail about just yet, is the Afghan Resettlement Program, which is what we see in the papers or the news all the time, which is the plan to bring in 2,000 people over the next few years to the UK in response to the current emergency situation. Kirklees will be playing its part, as we always do, by housing people arriving from Afghanistan as part of this response. And this is something we will be proud to support. Details are not yet confirmed by the Home Office, so we don't know how many people will come here or where they will be staying. We all want the best living arrangements possible for those seeking safety in Kirklees, and naturally the preferred option is always to find permanent housing. But in emergency situations like this, that's not always possible. Hotels are being used by the Home Office when they don't have the available permanent accommodation, when people either arrive seeking asylum or arrive in an emergency like the current situation. This is done temporarily until something more permanent is found. In preparation, though, in Kirklees, we are working with our partners on how we can support people with safe accommodation and access to the right health, social, well-being support, being of paramount importance in our planning. I know a lot of people will want to know where in Kirklees people might be staying. This is not something we know yet or have any control over, but we are invited to provide feedback on the suitability of identified accommodation in Kirklees. We have to make sure this is being done in the best possible way for those coming to us, as well as for our local communities. So when we feel a proposed site is inappropriate or unsuitable, we will make our objections very clear to the Home Office, and we have done, so they can consider this as part of their decision making. We'll assess the suitability of any proposed site based on a number of factors, including access to health service, transport, local amenities, condition of the accommodation, and others. If we do not judge the site to be suitable, we will raise our concerns with the Home Office, and as I say, we have done this already. We will, as always, do everything we can to work closely with the Home Office to support those coming to Kirklees, wherever that might be. Please be assured that our council staff and our amazing network of partners and volunteers are vastly experienced in helping people safely settle in Kirklees with all the right support and advice on hand. So, as I've said, Kirklees has a really proud record when it comes to supporting others, and we're once again ready to step up for those desperately in need of our help. However, I and senior management team and the leader are also urging government to make sure all local authorities play their part and are available to support the Afghan refugees. We're seeing such a positive response from local people throughout Kirklees, from messages of support to people offering up rooms in their own homes, landlords with empty properties contacting us for help. We've also seen a significant increase in donations to local charities supporting those coming to us as asylum seekers or refugees. The generosity of Kirklees people never ceases to amaze me, and they are once again stepping up to support people in desperate need of help. We have published details on our website with information on clothes donations, volunteering opportunities and activities, accommodation and more. So finally, I just want to end with a message to the people of Afghanistan or leaving Afghanistan, arriving here in Kirklees. You are welcome here, and there is safety and support ready for you. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pattison. If there is a role for the Mayor in this, then do get in touch with the Civic Office. Okay. I don't think there's any more announcements by the Chief Executive. So we'll go on to item 2, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies for absence? Councillor Sokol.
Mr. Mayor, I got apology from Councillor Noshin Dad and apology from Councillor Muhammad Sarba. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies for Councillor Terry Lyons and Councillor Paul White.
Councillor Richard Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have apologies from Councillors Kath Taylor, Donald Firth, Lisa Holmes and Bernard McGuinn. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor.
Mr. Mayor, I have apologies for Councillor Kath Pinnock. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the meeting of Council held on the 14th of July 2021 be approved as a correct record. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor Akhtar. Please vote by a show of hands. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members who have any disclosable pecuniary interests which would prevent them from discussing or voting on any item should disclose their interests now. Are there any interests to declare? Councillor Bolt.
Your guidance, Mr. Mayor, on item 14, the motion. The motion deals with the issue about taxes raised locally under precept. Mr. Mayor, I and several others in this chamber are town or parish councillors. Indeed, I'm proud to be the town mayor of Murfield. And as colleagues will be aware, town and parish councils get their money through precept, as indeed do the police authority, fire and other authorities. So the nature of this motion deals with the ability of those people to discharge their duties as town and parish councillors, fire authority members, police authorities. The one difference I would say, and again in seeking your guidance, Mr. Mayor, on whether myself and colleagues are able to stay, is that far from being a regressive council, as the motion intimates, Murfield Town Council, I'm pleased to say, Mr. Mayor, is a progressive council. Because this year, Mr. Mayor, Murfield Town Council recognised the situation and used its reserves to fund its existence, therefore setting a zero precept, which legally, Mr. Mayor, is still a precept, but in no way can it be described as regressive. So therefore, Mr. Mayor, do myself, fellow town and parish councillors, members of police authority, members of fire authority, and other precepted authorities have an interest to declare in this, and does that interest prohibit us from taking part? Hopefully.
I shall defer to my legal officer for advice.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Bolt. An interesting one. Obviously, it's up to members at the end of the day whether they decide that they're going to declare an interest or not. I don't think it's a disclosable pecuniary interest because I think it's too remote. And you're not required to do that when we set the budget and we consider the precepts in January and February meetings. Ultimately, it's an issue for you if you decide to declare that or not. In my view, I don't think it would be necessary on this occasion. But as I say, I always advise that it's for members to make their own decision, not me, okay? Because it's your disclosable pecuniary interest, not mine. But I don't think it's close enough.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
So transparency, really. On item 9, resource and waste strategy, just declaring an other interest that I am the alternative director for the Suez Recycling Limited for Kirklees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any other declarations from the floor? In that case, can I remind any members who have declared an interest to complete the form and submit to the clerk by the end of the meeting? Item 5, petitions from members of the council. Are there any petitions to be submitted? Councillor Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a petition that's been organised and compiled by myself, my ward colleague, Councillor Anthony Smith, Golka Ward councillors, Councillor Andrew Marchington and Councillor Robert Iredale, on behalf of the residents of the Longwood Edge area that covers both the Linley Ward and the Golka Ward. It's regarding tree planting and the use of council-owned land in this area to be retained and kept and preserved for tree planting. While some of it has been allocated already, residents and ourselves are keen to see that all of the council-owned land in the Longwood Edge area is retained and kept for tree planting, as we see the value in tree planting for our environment. And also, not only do we want to encourage more tree planting in the Linley Ward and all around Kirklees, but we also want to protect existing trees and protect the trees not only on the A629 Halifax Road, but all over the borough that are under threat. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Munro.
Mr Mayor, thank you. I'd like to hand in this petition on behalf of residents of Fenny Bankside in Fenny Bridge in relation to the state and condition of the road of Fenny Bankside. They'd like a comprehensive resurfacing of the said road, and I'd like to hand this petition in on their behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Are there any other petitions to be submitted by members of the council? In that case, in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 9(3), I direct that the subject matter of the petitions be referred to the appropriate service director for investigation. Item 6, deputations and petitions from members of the public. Deputations first. To receive deputations and petitions from members of the public this evening, we have 3 deputations. First, can I invite Leah Stewart to please come forward and present her deputation. Welcome to the meeting, Leah. You have 5 minutes to present your deputation to the council, and I'm afraid when it comes to 30 seconds, I shall interrupt you and say 30 seconds. I apologise for that.
That's all right.
But,
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
here you go.
My name is Leah Stewart. I'm a chartered civil engineer and a Huddersfield resident. I have been working in transport and urban engineering for 20 years. I'm going to talk to you today about the widening of the A629, which is not fit for purpose for the future of Kirklees. I will show how the scheme is unnecessary. I will challenge proposals at the A629 Blacker Road junction, and I will explain that the scheme doesn't meet current policies or its own stated objectives. I'm going to conclude by putting some questions to you. So firstly, the scheme is unnecessary. Looking at the bigger picture, it's based on accommodating traffic levels which will never occur. If we look at historic data from the Department for Transport, traffic levels have fallen to 3/4 of the level of what they were in their peak in the early 2000s. So there's no evidence that the A629 is experiencing continuous traffic growth. The traffic assessment assumes that traffic volumes will grow by 30% to 2038. So this is vastly overinflated when you compare it with historic growth, with national trends, and it directly contradicts targets and ambitions to reduce car traffic set out by the Combined Authority by up to 38%. So the scheme is actively investing in the failure of your own targets. Kirklees population predictions actually predict very little change in the number of working age people. So who's doing all this driving? It would have to be the same people, but every individual driving more often to generate that level of traffic. Coming on to Blacker Road, I want to focus on this area because this seems to experience the greatest negative impact through the loss of trees and the damage of listed buildings, yet delivers few benefits. The scheme was tested using strategic traffic modelling, and it shows that in 2038, when there's more traffic overall, there's actually 3,500 fewer vehicles travelling through that Blacker Road junction. So, of course, the junction works better, but not as a result of the physical changes there, but because there's less traffic going through the junction. And this suggests you could do the rest of the scheme without Blacker Road, and there may be an improvement anyway. What it says to me is you need to look again at the costs and benefits at this, particularly at this junction. And the design there widens the road to make a ghost island. What that does is increase pedestrian crossing distances, which is a particular problem for vulnerable people. And actually, coming on to my last point about policy and objectives, doesn't meet national design guidance, which puts people and place and pedestrians and cyclists at the top of the hierarchy above vehicles. And this scheme puts vehicles at the top. So when we're talking about national design guidance, we're talking about LTM 120, Manual for Streets 2, Gear Change, and the National Design Guide. And they all talk about walking and cycling as a priority. This scheme doesn't have any protected cycle provision at all. It's a major missed opportunity on such an important route into town. When we look at the carbon impact assessment, it shows that the scheme will have net carbon emissions of over 36,000 tonnes. At this time, we need to be reducing and not increasing emissions. And the scheme ought to improve air quality. But actually, 14 out of 23 of the worst-case receptors will see a worsening of air quality. And journey time saving is what it's all about. But actually, the scheme doesn't deliver journey time improvements across all scenarios. out of peak hours, journey times get longer. When we're looking at national policies, I've already mentioned some of the design stuff, but you've got your own climate emergency declaration, and West Yorkshire Combined Authority have their carbon emission reduction pathway. We also have Transport for the North decarbonisation strategy, which all look at reducing car travel to meet carbon targets. I'd like a way forward. I'd love a win-win solution here. Kirklees Council, you have made a bold statement in declaring a climate emergency, and you've got a great opportunity to look again at this scheme and refocus the investment to deliver sustainable future transport. You now have the opportunity to respond to your community who are so invested in our sustainable future and lead your engineering teams to deliver high-quality design consistent with your own policies and targets. So my questions, will the Council reconsider the whole scheme and instead deliver sustainable future transport for Huddersfield? Will the Council look again at the business case for each element of the scheme? It's worth reassessing the costs and benefits at Blacker Road.
10 seconds.
I urge you not to invest in the failure of your own policies, ambitions and targets. Please plan for the future you want.
Thank you. Sorry about that. We got distracted up here.
I know, I was expecting 30.
Councillor McBride to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Leah, for your contribution. I'll try to respond to your key points. You contend that the increase in traffic levels will not occur. The evidence is already strong that it is now little short of the pre-pandemic levels, and the forecasts are for a 2% growth annually for coming years. I noted the stress you placed on the negative impact of Blacker Road. It's at this area that the improvements to air quality are predicted to have the most significant effect. The improvements to sightlines are very evident, and visually there's no doubt of the positive impact. Anyone who's seen the scheme in detail, you can see that the greatest benefit visually is going to be in Blacker Road. The reduction of journey times of just a few minutes may not seem significant, but multiplied by volume numbers throughout the day, the carbon impact on standing traffic is very significant indeed. Finally, the very positive cycling and pedestrian improvements measures, which are contingent on the delivery of this scheme. So it's not a case of we'd like this, but we don't want the scheme. Those measures and the cost of those measures is dependent on delivery of that scheme. And as I say, overall, there's no doubt about the net benefits.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Can I now please invite Heather Peacock to present her deputation? Welcome to the meeting. You have 5 minutes. And I will try to remember to do a 30-second reminder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, I've not been in here since 1980 when I was in the Mrs. Sunderland singing competition. And I'm tone deaf, so it didn't go that well. I hope it goes better today. I was listening today from yesterday's Kirklees Council Economic and Neighbourhood Scrutiny panel. And they were talking about the cultural heart, which is going to be coming down there. And I was really pleased that the comments from councillors really encouraged me as a climate emergency and tree protester. They want it green. It's got to be green. The heating, everything has got to be green. All the councils were chipping in. It was really encouraging. It's going to be a fantastic building. And one of the councillors said that they needed to put in a flood thing, not a defence, but like they need to think about the flooding because we're having more flooding. This is part of obviously the climate emergency. We're going to have more bad weather. So we're planning for flooding already. We know what's going to happen. And then we've got this, 126 mature trees getting chopped down, a widening of the road, which is going to encourage cars. I'd like to ask the council to reconsider this, certainly. And I'd certainly want a meeting, a face-to-face meeting with officers and the relevant councillors. We shouldn't be widening roads because it just attracts more traffic. We've signed up to WICA's carbon emissions pathway, and it wants a reduction in car journeys. This is only going to encourage more. And like Leah says, there are going to be CO2 emissions for 36,000 tonnes in its lifestyle. Widening the road won't solve the problem, it will just make it worse. We need to look to Wales for inspiration. Wales has suspended all future road building plans to tackle the climate emergency. The Deputy Minister said we need to shift away from projects that encourage more people to drive, spend more money maintaining the roads, and invest in real alternatives that give people a meaningful choice, i.e. public transport. Speaking last week, Caroline Lucas spoke of the government's £27 billion road building plans and how it's the last thing we needed in the climate emergency. She said the scheme would lock us into climate catastrophe. The unfortunate side effect to widening the road is the 126 iconic Huddersfield trees, most of which are positioned in private gardens. These trees are some of the most protected trees in Kirklees and so should be untouchable. Many have got individual TPOs and there's a woodland TPO at Blacker Road Woods, including the Queen Beech, which is possibly older than this town hall. And other trees are covered by the conservation areas of Edgerton, Greenhead and New North Road. These magnificent trees not only support a varied local wildlife, but are crucial in the fight against the climate emergency. As the biggest plant on earth, they clean our air, store carbon, stabilise the soil and are a habitat for wildlife. They are vital to our very survival. The mitigation package for the loss of the trees, according to our group's opinion, is wholly unacceptable. And I have to say that I've lost confidence in mitigation at all when the Blot on the Landscape warehouse was allowed to lose their tree screen and just plant a few whips. The mitigation package for the loss of trees in this group is unacceptable, like I've said. These trees are well over 20 metres tall and are to be replaced by 100 5 to 7 metre trees. Unbelievably, and I thought it was a joke when somebody told me, 37 of which are Lowlandii and some are pleached. As these trees are in private gardens, this mitigation relies heavily on the cooperation of residents, and they may just refuse to put new trees in. Is there a backup plan for this? You can't replace irreplaceable trees. It takes time to mitigate their true loss. It would be near 60,000 young trees, certainly not 750, which is proposed. It's a misconception that young trees absorb more CO2 than older ones. It's only when the trees mature that they fully absorb the CO2. Strangely, on the 24th of August, a superseded document turned up on the application, bearing in mind the application was due to close on the 10th of August. That was the correct carbon impacts assessment. If you want to see the physical loss of the trees in black and white, it's on the carbon impact assessment. Timber leaving site for disposal, 5,209 tonnes. Timber coming in is 1.92 tonnes. Is that it? Thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Councillor McBride to respond.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
I realise you feel very passionately about this, but we all do. Those concerned with this scheme, and I am, are deeply concerned about the issue in total and about its environmental impact. The H629 suffers congestion, poor air quality, and extensive delays. This scheme addresses these issues. The improvement in journey times appears small, but if you multiply the impact by the number of vehicles using the road, improvements in overall journey times are very significant indeed. And this is particularly so in terms of air quality in the Blacker Road area. Now an air quality management area, we expect that the impact of these measures will remove that negative status from Kirklees. We strongly contend that the loss of trees is at least compensated for by 89 semi-mature trees and 750 smaller trees, and officers estimate that within 3 years the positive impacts will be felt, and from there on compoundedly getting more significant and more significant as the years go by. So overall, this is a plus both in terms of climate change and in terms of the environment, as well as being most important for the movement of traffic, which is critical for our lives.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Can I now invite Hannah Longbottom to present her deputation? Once again, welcome. You have 5 minutes, and I will interrupt you with 30 seconds to go.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hannah Longbottom. I'm a Huddersfield resident. In fact, I'm Huddersfield born and bred. I'm also a local business owner. I'm here to present a petition which was launched just over a month ago. The petition is titled, Save Edgerton's Iconic Trees in Huddersfield. The petition has already received over 3,000 signatures. I'm going to read out what the petition is asking for, what 3,000 people are asking for. This petition demands that Kirklees Council stop the road widening plans at Blacker Road Junction and remove them from the A629 road widening scheme. The plans at the Blacker Road Junction include the following. Firstly, the removal of 87 mature trees. These trees include oak, beech, horse chestnut, and lime trees. Secondly, the plans will include the loss of wildlife habitat. Bats, birds, bees, and badgers all live here. Thirdly, the plans involve the removal of important architectural features and the loss of local heritage. And fourthly, we will see a damage to Edgerton Conservation Area and Greenhead Park Conservation Area. It should be noted that 85 out of these 87 trees are legally, yes, legally protected. 59 of the trees are protected by tree preservation orders, TPOs as we know them. 26 of the trees are protected by the fact they're in a conservation area. And in fact, many of the trees have a TPO and are in a conservation area. These are trees that are protected by you, the council, because they are so important. Blacker Road Junction is already an air quality black spot, as we've heard from Councillor McBride. Removing 87 pollution-absorbing trees will make this worse. Kirklees Council say they have declared a climate emergency. For many, the first impression of Huddersfield is the stunning tree-lined avenue, the A629. Removal of these trees from Blacker Road Junction will irreversibly destroy this gateway into Huddersfield forever. So I wouldn't normally check my phone in a meeting, and certainly not in a full council meeting, but I just wanted to bring you the latest petition numbers, if you will allow me. I don't know what the Wi-Fi is like in here. So currently, and it's a live petition, there are 3,223 signatures. Please do listen to us. Thank you. And sorry, just to add, if anybody would like a leaflet, we have got some at the front, if you'd like some more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Councillor McBride.
Thank you, Hannah, for your contribution. I know your feelings are heartfelt. The points you're making have been made by others. I've responded to them, I hope, effectively. And to say that the net outcome of this scheme is a positive in every sense, both from the point of view of the the economy of this area, which is absolutely critical, but also in terms of the environment and the area. And I do know the area. I worked at Hollybank, which is on Edgerton Road, for 30 plus years. I lived on the road for many, many years. I was deeply concerned about the whole environment, still am deeply concerned, not only about this environment, but all environments. But one's got to see the protection of these environments in terms of the needs of the whole community for movement, and that will be true for a very long time. Now, it's contended that that demand has gone down. The evidence contradicts it. The evidence that the demand is increasing, and what we see now is that the pandemic has reduced it temporarily, but now it's building back up to virtually post-pandemic levels. And the evidence is it will continue to do that. We've got to control that. And if any of you have seen the mock-ups of what is being provided for particularly the Blacker Road area, I think you'd find a massive improvement. Not merely in terms of sightlines and in terms of air quality management, but also in terms of what it looks like. I think you'd see a massive improvement. I've been aware of the area. I've walked the area at times, every day of my life. So I'm acutely aware of it and acutely aware of the issue. So it's not with dismissive attitude that I say this scheme is reasonable, it does achieve its objectives, and it does not contradict our commitments to climate change.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. So we're going to part 2, which is petitions. I understand Julie Whittaker's had to leave early, but the petition has been submitted to us. We don't have anybody to say what the petition is about.
Is that on? Yep. The petition requests the installation of fixed-speed cameras along the dual carriageway A653 in Leeds Road, Dewsbury, between Shaw Cross and Woodkirk Post Office.
Did everyone hear that? Yes. Thank you for that. I'm assuming that Hannah's petition is online and therefore will be forwarded online. Okay, that will be submitted at a later time. Thank you. So in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 9(3), I direct that the subject matter of the petition be referred to the appropriate service director for investigation. So now we go on to item 7, public question time. We have a question from Keith Mallinson first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is to the Cabinet and local Dewsbury councillors. How long do Cabinet members think it is acceptable to wait until the council steps in to address health and safety issues arising from unfinished roads and pavements on a new housing development?
Councillor Mather, I believe you're replying to this one.
Thank you for your question. Soon as we're made aware, we actually assess the situation and respond accordingly. Did anybody get in touch with anyone?
As far as I understand, a lot of the local residents have been complaining that it's been 6 months since, I understand, the last house was built and moved into, and nothing seems to be done about the pavements and the roads. There's unfinished roads on Amberwood Chase, Cedar Court, Hawthorne Court and Rosewood Drive.
Councillor Bolt, can you sit down, please? Oh, Councillor Bolt, can you sit down, please? Councillor Bolt, I was aware of what was going on. I was letting it run because Councillor Mather has a habit of doing this. I'm going to have a word with her after the council meeting. It seems she did it at the last council meeting too. So let's not have questions and answers across the floor.
Well, it just needs some clarity, Mr. Mayor.
You don't. So you've got two questions. You've got a question and a supplementary. Ask your supplementary, or repeat your first question, and see if the cabinet member can answer it.
Repeat the first question. Okay. So how long do cabinet members think it's acceptable to wait until the council steps in to address health and safety issues with regards to unfinished roads and pavements on a new development? How long should they wait? Bearing in mind that it's been, I understand, about 6 months since the last person moved in.
I'm sorry, I will ask you to email me so that I have a prepared response, because I don't know anything about the scheme.
I did email.
It's not really my portfolio either. Housing development is not my portfolio.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I did email the question in when I was asked to do last week.
Mr. Mallinson, wait. Councillor Scott, are you going to answer the question? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mallinson. Indeed, it has took a long time, but just so the residents out there, they have been emailing me. They are in contact with our enforcement team, and they are dealing with it. I appreciate what you're saying. The construction is 5.5 years in, and there's still, but this is some duties that Harron Homes has to deal with, and the council is putting pressure on them to get this resolved. I'm happy to talk to you after that. I'll meet up with you anytime, but the residents are fully aware. They're in contact with the Dewsbury's councillors, Councillor Lukic, Councillor Eric Firth. We've been in the email chain. We're all fully aware, and residents are being kept up to date. Okay, thank you.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Mallinson?
Well, yeah, the question was, how long is it, to be honest with you? That was the question. How long do we wait? I mean, I understand our local MP has contacted Harron Homes with no response, and
I appreciate supplementary. It's as ever, we're relying on that development. We should be putting pressure on. We are putting pressure on. I am aware of the MP, Mark Eastwood, being involved. He's been involved in the email chain, so he's fully aware of where we're up to with it. But as I said, I will reassure you, happy to meet with you, but I'm also meeting with local residents and taking their concerns forward. Okay?
Thank you. Next question. Next questioner, please. Greg Christophe.
Good evening, all. This is a question for Councillor McBride. I'm a shopkeeper in Holmforth in Victoria Street, and I have built my business over 27 years and 3 days today. I'm employing over 22 staff, and I met you before and I talked to you about this. It's going to damage this scheme, road scheme is going to damage my business. It's going to put me out of business. And by removing the unloading outside my shop and put it on the other side, my suppliers will not supply me, and of course, it will close me down. Also, it's another effect in another 4 shops, not just me. It's another 4 shops that are going to be affected in the same way. I spoke to them, they are all in one voice, and we're asking you really to remove the unloading side on the other side, or put both loading and unloading areas, so we on both roads, so we can carry on with our own business every day, you know. So we are here, we're trying to survive. We've been in difficult times with COVID, So we've been offering services to all residents when all the closures, and that I feel really is a punch in the face. So I'll leave it to you now.
Councillor McBride to respond.
The gentleman knows we've been over the scheme again and again and again, and we've looked at the pros and cons. There is difficulty. Whatever scheme you put in, there will be some negative impacts, one side of the road or the other. I think you exaggerate the negative impacts, albeit I accept there are some for your business and for some on that side of the road. But if you want to kill the whole scheme, which I think is your overall intent, the negative impact is to block that road indefinitely and interminably. And we've judged on balance that it's better to go through with the limited scheme, which is approved by the great majority of the public.
Supplementary.
Yes, I think Mr. McBride is wrong. We don't want to kill the scheme. All we're asking is for both sides of the roads to be existing. You know, we are there, we've been there for 27 years, as I said, so we want both sides of the roads to have loading and unloading area. The other side is only 2 people that get service, and it's barrels. Ours is perishable goods. So, and we go more deliveries on our side of the roads than the other ones. So what we're asking is both sides of the roads, and we are happy.
Councillor McBride to respond.
The net result of that would be the maintenance of the status quo, and the road is blocking and getting worse. So in other words, if the net effect you want is no change, no improvement whatsoever, and the great majority of the public in the area do want to see that change, we, on balance, we do recognise that it's difficult, both sides of the road, but this is the inevitable compromise we've had to make.
Thank you. Next question. Hang on, just a minute. Hang on a minute. Right, we've only got one. We're over our 15 minutes. This is the problem. No, we're not. Oh, heck. Right, we're not quite over. We can just fit this last one in. If it's a good short question. Leah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask a supplementary question and to point out to Councillor McBride, thank you for answering. Traffic modelling is a tool to aid decision-making. It's not a prediction of the future. By the fact that it is, it's a technical way of trying to estimate, but that means it's not evidence of increased growth. It doesn't mean traffic will grow. We can choose by the infrastructure that we put in what kind of future we want. I can talk technical information at any of you as much as you want, but I'm not going to do that now. But what I would request, and my question is, will you, Councillor McBride, and your officers meet with us to discuss the scheme in more detail? I've also got some copies of my deputation. I'm going to leave them there. Thank you.
Councillor McBride to respond.
I've met with numerous people many times, but yes, I will. As far as the officers are concerned, I can't commit them, but I would strongly recommend that they join me in that, okay?
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Right. Item 8 then. West Yorkshire Combined Authority minutes, page 11. To receive for information the minutes of West Yorkshire Combined Authority. The minutes are here for noting. Are there any comments or questions regarding the minutes? Councillor Pinnock, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I refer people to paragraph 16 in the report, which is all about bus reform. And I'll be quite honest and say that when I heard Tracy Brabin talking about doing wonderful things for the bus network in West Yorkshire. I, as a former member of the Transport Committee, was a little bit sceptical, I have to admit. However, because I know that when the authority tried to do something about this, the bus companies were a bit obstinate, shall we say, but having read this summary report here, I am at least partially encouraged because it's trying to do something that we need absolutely desperately in West Yorkshire. We, as a conurbation, have a very poor legacy of road networks and so on which we want bus services to run, which obviously is the future. And I don't know whether anybody can answer this, but I would like some indication, there is one in the report, that it won't be done quickly. I would like some indication of roughly how long it might take to deal with this, because there have in the past been legal difficulties in the way of having a properly legally enforceable franchise, which is clearly the ideal solution to this, that the local authority, in the person of the combined authority, is the one that specifies the services, and that one hopes the bus companies will come along with this. I sincerely hope that this can be done, because, as I say, when I was on the Transport Committee, there was a lot of gloom about ever making this happen. So it is good, although I do wonder why 2 people abstained in the vote. But this isn't a witch hunt or anything, but it would be nice to have a unanimous approval. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Any other speakers? Councillor Bolt. Just to remind you, if you want to speak, put your hands up. The officers at the back will note who wants to speak, and it will come out on this screen. Makes my job tons easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Reflecting on these minutes, I note that item 7, referred to on page 14, reflects the nomination of Councillor Andrew Cooper as a member of scrutiny on West Yorkshire. Could I congratulate him on that, and probably just ask if anything he's heard tonight from the deputations suggests to him that there's a need for West Yorkshire scrutiny to review what's been happening in Kirklees with some of the major projects. Leading on, Mr. Mayor, item 19 on page 23 talks about an uplift in programme management budget. Significant uplift from 2.76 million to 7.69 million. Projects in West Yorkshire often go up more than they come down, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor McBride has commented before about local authorities who get funding for schemes and then come back and get an increase because they want more money. So based on that, could I ask our leader and his representatives that when they go to West Yorkshire, let's not be shy about asking for value for money for schemes. We were told by officers that the much-needed Cooper Bridge relief scheme to deliver a proper, fit-for-purpose scheme with a flyover, not damaging woods, not impinging on people for many years during construction, would have a value higher than the budget which is allocated. Here we see budget allocations going up. We've seen budget allocations rise for other schemes in many other authorities. So shouldn't the Kirklees leader and his representatives be saying to West Yorkshire, in order to deliver a scheme which is West Yorkshire backed, it has the Calderdale badge on it, although I've seen an email from a Calderdale officer which refers to it as the Kirklees scheme. Seem to be distancing themselves when senior Calderdale officers are talking to their councillors. It's not a Kirklees scheme, it's a significant regional scheme, and as such I believe it should have the funding, the vision and the opportunity to deliver something which will improve our area, will improve the region's facilities and will not gridlock the roads for the many years during construction. So let's take a leaf from this report and ask for an uplift in a capital project for the benefit of Kirklees, Calderdale and West Yorkshire. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. Are there any more questions, comments on this item? I'm hoping there aren't, because I've made a bit of a faux pas. We've got to do the key discussion before 7. And I wanted to get a 10-minute break in before we did that. So unless anybody's got any questions they desperately need to make on this. No? Right, so it's just a note, this, isn't it? Yeah, Councillor Pandor to respond.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Pinnock, and to Councillor Martin Bolt for their questions and comments. In terms of bus reform, you're right, Councillor Pinnock, it is a very complex situation, and I'm glad you've shared your experiences over the many, many years, and you're probably more briefed and more versed in the detail regarding how difficult this is, because there are legal complications. But my view is very, very clear, and this is what I've said all along. In terms of the outcome, it's got to benefit the public. What the model is, what the delivery is, it's important, but you've got to look at the costs, you've got to look at the timescales, and one thing as elected members we know, that our residents continuously come to us regarding bus cancellations, bus routes changing, completely, overhaul of services. And if we can actually start to achieve the outcome that our residents are looking for, and we have the value for money modelling that has been done at the same time, I think that's a plus. But what I will do is I will keep on pressing along with other colleagues at the Combined Authority to try and speed this up. But one thing we have to do is we have to make sure we do it properly. In terms of the issue that Councillor Martin Bolt has raised, he's referring to the Transforming Cities Fund. If you look at the report, he actually talks about TCF, which is something that I, along with other leaders, when we were going through the negotiations of making sure that we get our fair share of the Transforming Cities Fund. And one of the conditions I put down with the leaders at that time, and also Robert Jenrick and the Treasury, Rishi Sunak, was that we will not agree to a deal unless we get a higher share of the TCF funding. And through various negotiations, which I don't want to go into detail at this moment in time, I was promised with all the leaders, and there is an agreement there, that we will get the maximum of the TCF bid, which is the high scenario, which is around 15 million quid. Very, very recently, one of the government departments, not MHCLG to be honest with you, I think it was the departments that deal with transport, reviewed and re-looked at what the allocation would be. And that raised alarm bells. Councillor Peter McBride and Councillor Eric Firth actually immediately emailed me and rang me saying that you need to keep an eye on this. At the meeting we have had very, very recently, I went back and I said that I cannot agree to this new scenario that has been put forward. I also made sure that Robert Jenrick knew about this, the MHCLG Secretary of State, and we have now been assured that the bid that we have put in will reflect the issue that Councillor Martin Bolt has put in. Because one of the things that is very, very clear, we've got into the Combined Authority to make sure that we get our fair share of the resources. And the whole rationale was to make sure that we draw down the monies that the government has allocated. And I completely agree with that. Boris Johnson made it very, very clear when he came up north that he wants to level up. He wants to make sure that the north is leveled up, and he wants to make sure that we actually do get the investment that is needed. And that is one thing that I will keep on batting for. And I'd like to thank Martin for bringing that to our attention. And I think one of the things, Martin, is that as long as we keep on pushing together, put our politics aside, and bat for Kirklees, we'll all benefit. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. and thank you for bringing them questions to my attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. 10-minute break, then back key discussion. Okay, thank you. Before we go on with the key discussion, I just want to remind Council that we do need to get some business done before 9 o'clock. So we've got item 9, Resources and Waste Strategy, the financial outturn report and the committee systems proposal that we would like to get through at the very least if we can. So with that, on to key discussion. Rachel is going to give us a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Today I'm going to outline for you the district's key recovery challenges on the back of experiencing the COVID pandemic. I think that you will have all been aware of the physical and mental impacts of COVID. I think that we recognise that for a lot of people, the effects of COVID physically, in terms of those that have lost loved ones or those that are suffering with long COVID, and actually the mental health impact of not only being part of that shared trauma, but also the mental health impacts of lockdown and everything that goes alongside that. So there is going to be a real challenge as people start to work through that over the next year and into the future. It's also important to talk about how, we have a role across the district to support people who have been out of employment, perhaps through furlough, and how we can help to find new employment opportunities. There's been some really inspiring examples of where people have retrained. So we know that the retail sector has been significantly hit through COVID, and we've had people who are in that sector retrained to work in social care, for example. So how do we make sure that there are opportunities there, particularly for young people, as part of that recovery? The response across partners has been really, really stark. It has been a common endeavour that we've all come together on. And I think certainly in Kirklees, we want to maintain those cross-partner arrangements. For me, the vaccination campaign has been a really good example of where we have been working collaboratively across NHS, other key partners, and then with our local elected members who've helped us find the best locations for those pop-ups within the district. Working within communities with elected members at the heart have been absolutely key in both the immediate response to COVID, but also in the longer term, and how we strengthen and build on that in order to be able to continue with that way of working and help us to achieve that working on a place basis so that we are actually responding to the needs within those communities and also the assets, because I think there has been a lot of assets in terms of community groups and community energy that we could capitalise on in terms of delivering what needs to happen going forward. How do we make sure that our economic recovery is reflective of that as well, and we look at things on the small and large scale? Inclusion is something that as a council has been committed to as a key agenda, and how we tackle the inequalities that have arisen during COVID and those that have been exacerbated. We can build on the digital opportunities and make sure that we're not leaving anybody behind by increasing our digital inclusion, and also through the Inclusion Commission to tackle the underlying issues, in particular where the pandemic has had that impact. In terms of the council itself, because obviously these are challenges across the borough, for the council itself, every single day I've been proud of our staff. They have gone above and beyond. They have managed in circumstances that I don't think anybody trained for or was expecting. And obviously balancing their physical and mental impacts of this. But actually there's a real energy from the staff to try and say, how do we build on this? How do we recover effectively? How do we make sure we've got that strong customer focus? And actually, how do we use technology? So we've managed to work in a remote way. How do we use that most effectively to best deliver outcomes for people. We know that our frontline workers who've been working throughout, how do we support their greater flexibility going forward? And then I think finally, we know that there have been a number of recruitment challenges for Kirklees, and we're not alone in this. This is across the country. And we've got some key sectors where we know we're going to have difficulty going forward. So how do we address that for our key areas and professions to carry on and deliver the work that the council needs to do? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Rachel. Can I now invite Councillor Pandor to start the discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Rachel, for that presentation. It's been a hard 18 months, and one of the things I just want to thank all councillors is for all the hard work you have put in along with your communities. And I'm sure you are the ones who have actually been the vanguard and the champions in your community. And I'm sure that the challenges that you faced over the 18 months, you'll bring your experiences and what you saw, hopefully, forward in tonight's discussion and debate. Because in your role as ward councillors, let's not be under any illusion that the recovery is going to be very, very difficult. But at the same time, there are huge opportunities. And this is an opportunity for you to actually feed into that process. You've engaged with your communities, your residents, teachers, schools, and local businesses, especially making sure that they navigate their way through the help and the support that the government put forward. But it just can't be just about coming back to business as normal. Whatever we do, we have to make sure that we actually come back a lot stronger, and the opportunities are there. What we've seen in the last 18 months is something that I could never imagined in terms of the way we've transformed ourselves, not just as a council, but as a community and as councillors, using the place standard tool and place-based working. There's a massive opportunity to capitalise on. We don't just want to open up business. We want to make sure that we attract new investment, we develop our skills base, and we actually harness the opportunities that are there. One thing that we all know, that the next generation is very, very important. Children are our future, and as a cabinet, as a council, one of the things that we have done is made sure that every single child is important, and every single child cannot get left behind. And that's where we need to just focus on how we can start to exceed expectations for our younger people. But we need to do that by making sure that we have the resources and the right resources in the right place. As an example, I can only give you my own example. I'm sure many of you will share your own examples. But my daughter, she's just turned 18. She was hit right in the middle of the pandemic. She was doing A-levels, and to be honest with you, it was a roller coaster. I myself shared that frustration, that anxiousness, that uncertainty, and that stress. And those of you who know me will know that every time I saw officers and members, I always used to talk about my daughter, saying, "Oh God, I just hope that she does well." Luckily, she got the grade she wanted, and she's hopefully going off to university at the beginning of October. But it's not just about my child; it's about every single child. How do we make sure that we provide them opportunities and get every child to exceed beyond expectations? The relationships that we've developed with organisations has only been possible through the hard work of the councillors. But that relationship needs to actually move forward now. That relationship needs to harness the energy and the passion and the capacity that we've actually put into our communities. So the big question is, how do we make that into a reality? And that's something I want you to focus on. No one should get left behind. The trickle-down economics that we have been used to, we need to put that on its head and start thinking about how we can actually reshape and transform that trickle-down economic model to make sure that nobody gets left behind, and we actually do take our vision and aspirations forward. As a Cabinet, we've recently reviewed our priorities on the back of the recovery, and that will be developing in the next few months when we start to work the details of the council plan. And the questions and the debate that we get tonight will hopefully shape that council plan. This is beyond party politics as far as I'm concerned, because when I go around the country, people say to me that, how do you manage in a situation where you've got no overall control? And I'm proud to say that one of the things that I can say proudly is when it comes to the nuts and bolts of making sure that we deliver and we put our mouth where our words are and our actions where our mouth is, should I say, we do get behind and we do put politics on one side, and I'm hoping that we can do that tonight as well. Because the future is too important. You know, I might be here today, tomorrow there might be another leader, but that vision and that ambition and that shared value and that shared action plan will continue. So please share your visions, please share your thoughts and your ideas and your experiences, because your experiences and what you've been through as councillors is critical to making sure that we do get our recovery plan and our council plan right. Let's harness and develop and build on the energy that we've already seen. Inclusion, diversity, in its broadest sense, we might start arguing about the detail, but we all have our own issues, and this is an opportunity we can actually start to put into our plans moving forward. And inclusion and diversity is the heartbeat and is at the heart of all the plans that we are developing. So we need to break the cycle of people getting left behind. So without further ado, please do contribute, please share your experiences, and I hope as many of you come forward and actually share your experiences, your ideas, and any questions you have. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will now ask, through you, other members to come and share their experiences. Thank you, and thank you, Rachel, for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Pandor. Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Rachel, for your presentation. This section is titled COVID Recovery, but I think it's worth a brief moment just revisiting. I mean, thank you, Rachel, for your presentation. And just a massive thank you to all the work that's been done locally by your team, by people working with health, working in communities. I think a few of us will say that, but, you know, there's been a massive effort, everybody doing that, and it's appreciated. There'll be a time to look back seriously about what's happened. I think, Rachel, again, somewhere else you said it's going to take years before we actually understand what was going on and whether our responses were genuinely appropriate. I think a couple of things I would highlight. I think hopefully we've started realising the importance of experts in our public life. I was just really thankful that the two guys on either side really did know what they were talking about. There are political decisions to be made. I heard on the radio the other day, once politicians get involved in scientific decisions, they become political decisions. And politics is a good thing. It's about debate, and there were choices to be made. But a big thank you to that, and we do need over time not to forget the lessons that have been learned when we have the next. You know, we are going to be living with COVID in the future, but the next global pandemic might be 100 years hence, and we need to remember what's learned, and it might be how we learn to deal with flu or other things, so we need to do that. That's just a bit of retrospective. The recovery, suggestions for the recovery. I think the recovery needs to be green. People working from, I know there's been issues about people working from home, but actually walking around our communities in those first few months of lockdown in air that was not, you know, you could refreshing air, you know, fresh air, not diesel, not petrol. You could hear the birds sing. And actually, if more of us can work, where it's appropriate with the appropriate spot, can work from home rather than travelling into Huddersfield or Dewsbury or Batley or Leeds, then that's going to be part of that. And we need to, and it is worrying, you know, when Peter's saying, oh, well, traffic levels are getting back almost to pre-pandemic levels. That's not a pleasant thing. It would be good if we can keep that, you know, the need to travel down to a minimum. And there's work to be done on that. How do we make sure that those that want to work home can do that? It's productive. You know, why are we having a meeting?
why are we all sat here in the council chamber? You know, does it need all 69 of us to be here face to face? Is there a more productive way of us making the decisions we need to make? And it is nice meeting people, but let's do any part of our life, and that's just like the recovery needs to be great. There's an opportunity for investment. So there was a bit of an about, you know, the rail, you know, investment in rail infrastructure, the investment in bus infrastructure. Yeah, so what can we do to make sure that our life ahead is, you know, and that's an opportunity. I'm going to link this into business as well. I understand that, you know, the central government has, you know, found sufficient money to make sure that there's not been the impact that there was in 2008-9. We can touch on the it's great that there's 48 million pounds gone in to support things. So we've not lost as many jobs as we did in 2008-9. We're building from a bigger base. That's absolutely the right thing to do. But at a time when the cost of servicing the national debt is at historic lows, it's as low as it had been since 1900. It's probably the lowest it ever has been. It's only 3% of gross our national product. It is a bit disappointing that central government has found it necessary to increase national insurance, put a £12 billion burden on both, you know, workers and the, because, you know, there does need to be a discussion sometime about how we pay for responsibly the way ahead, but there's a bit more wiggle room at the moment, you know, and the government could be borrowing for infrastructure investment and things like that. And in terms of local businesses and business recovery, central government could be investing to make sure employers, we could link up, and I think some of the lessons we've learned about our local employers, what skills do you need? What did employers do? How can we link that up? And again, that could link back to being green, but anything, you know, we make loads of stuff in Kirklees, but do we know what we make? You know, where do we buy the windows, the doors, the food that's produced locally, and that thing, and can we use good investment from central government channeled through good local, you know, through Kirklees, through good local authorities to do that. So there is an opportunity there, business recovery. I'm just going to finish if I've got time. Oh,
you've got 10 seconds.
The issues around mental health, and hopefully other colleagues in the group will touch on that. There is an opportunity, it's shone a light on it, particularly with young people and with older people with isolation. There's an opportunity to actually do better there, and COVID has shone a spotlight on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Councillor Khan.
The majority of the council's budget spent on children and adult services, so it's only apt that I talk about adult social care and recovery. According to Age UK's analysis over this last year, there's been a 25% increase in people aged over 60 needing social care assistance. This national picture is reflected locally within our adult social care services, and we're seeing a massive increase in demand in all areas. There is an annual mandated survey of people who use social care services, and this year it was optional in light of the pandemic, but we thought it was important that we continue to get benchmarkable insights into people's experiences of our services. Sadly, only nationally 17 other councils had a similar view, so the vast majority did not undertake the survey this year. There is generally a continued improvement in people's self-reported experiences despite the pandemic, which is really good news. 89.7% of the proportion of people who use services say that those services have made them feel safe and secure, and this is an increase on the previous years. 66.7% were very or extremely satisfied with the care and support they received. 93.5 respondents said their quality of life was so good it couldn't be better, and again this was an increase on the previous years. The single most marked decline in performance was in social contact, not surprisingly given that we had a lockdown and a lot of services were closed, so that was to be expected. Moving forward with recovery, the area that we are going to particularly focus improvement activity on is access to advice and information, because this is the area that over the last 5 years has seen the least improvement, and it's important in helping people make informed decisions. So in response to increasing demands, technological change and changing expectations of end users, we also need to rethink the way care home provision operates and is commissioned locally as we move into recovery. This can only be effectively delivered with the right level of partner capacity and support from the local authority to change and diversify care home businesses. Recruitment and retention remains a challenge within the sector, and it is a shame that this government's proposals didn't take the opportunity to address this by aligning care sector wages in parity with their NHS colleagues who are paid a living wage. This recently announced national regressive solution for adult social care is too little too late. The Prime Minister had a chance to effect real reform. Instead, he chose the Tory base over disabled people and care workers. The plans do little to address the systemic issues facing the sector. The problem with the government's efforts is not simply the lack of adequate cash, it's a lack of vision for how to use it. Johnson has managed to create a social care plan that essentially has no plan for social care except to preserve the inheritance of wealthy pensioners. So despite this consistent national failure to formulate a real plan, we've continued success on our improvement journey in Kirklees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a key discussion on the Council's COVID-19 recovery, looking forward. Now, and that's exactly what I would like to do. Over the last 6, 12, 18 months, we've heard a lot of backslapping and a lot of congratulating people about how they've coped with the pandemic and so forth. I'm not going to join in that now. What I want to do is I want to look forward, okay? And I have some real concerns here. I take up the leader's invitation to engage in the debate. I'm pleased to hear that. I hear what he says about working cross-party, but ultimately, there is a leadership in this council that is responsible, and it is responsible for delivery of services. And it's fine talking about what the Prime Minister says about national policies and stuff like that, but we're here, this council is here, to deliver for the people of Kirklees. It's here to deliver for the people that pay council tax in Kirklees. That's all. That's all we have to do, just deliver those services. So, I'm extremely concerned, actually, and what I'd like to see us do, I'd like to see us all work together, and I'd like to see us to turbocharge this council, because I am exceptionally concerned at the moment about service delivery. I am concerned that there is a degree of complacency setting into this council, both at the political level, but also, I have to say, within some of the officers as well, about the reason that this council exists. The reason is to deliver services. And if you look at the questions that I put in tonight, and I'm really looking forward to getting some answers to these, because you'll see that there is a theme running through these questions. My workload as a councillor has gone through the roof in the last 3 or 4 months. Now, that just may be me. It may be that I've not been working hard enough in the past, but it may be that other people are experiencing this. But there's a key theme here. The thing that residents are contacting me about is service delivery. They can't get through to the council. They can't get answers. Their bins are not getting emptied. Road signs are not getting cleaned. Road markings can't be seen. You'll see I've made reference to a driving instructor who can't teach his students to follow the lines because the lines are not there. Hedges are not getting cut. Paths are not getting cleared. I've even had one case that I've had to deal with an elderly lady with dementia who had not had a shower for several months. Now, for us all to sit here and be complacent and congratulate everybody about how well they've done through COVID, that's fine. But we now need to look forward. We now need to move forward. And what I'd actually like to see in this council is less talking and more delivery. Let's get these services delivered. Let's turbocharge this council and let's get doing what we're actually supposed to do for the people of Kirklees. Because at the moment, the feedback that I'm getting from residents is that actually the council isn't very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Rupel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say a few words, so I won't be here too long. I actually want to start off by thanking our council staff and in particular frontline staff. At a time when we were told to stay at home, they were out delivering a lot of our services. So, you know, frontline social workers, our bin team, our social care teams as well, they were doing absolutely excellent work when we were told to stay at home. So I hope we can all say that we should you know, provide our support and applause to those workers for everything that they've done for us. I know Councillor Watson's raised some points, and I think it's important that we do, where there are issues with service delivery, we must look at it and we must try and learn and improve from it as well. But I do think generally our staff have been exceptional during this very, very difficult time. And we can't look at this without the national context. National context is important. This council, like many other councils, has suffered from austerity. That is happening. That isn't a lie, and it's still happening. We can't just say that that isn't there. There are also issues. There's been some good support nationally from government during the COVID crisis, so things have been put in place, especially with the furlough scheme, the increase on universal credit, which is really important. But a number of these schemes will be coming to an end. And again, this is going to have an impact on low-income workers. So again, we can't look at this without the national context. Absolutely, we should look locally and review our service where we need to. But let's not say that the national context has nothing to do with this. Government has a massive part to play here in making sure that we have a fair funding settlement as well. Also, I just wanted to mention, in terms of the work that has gone in locally, I think one of the good things that's happened is that we've worked really well with the voluntary sector as well. So locally, for us, we've been able to work with local faith groups, with local schools. Also, our anchor group was Local Services to You, and they did some excellent work, and I hope we're able to continue with how we were able to work so closely with them. And we were able to hold a vaccination take-up scheme also in our local Chestnut Centre, which went really, really well, and the NHS, local council and the voluntary sector was able to come together. And just overall, I think we do need to look at work differently now that we've gone through COVID. We should be able to live well. Everyone should be able to live well. And, you know, hopefully Kirklees will be a fair and good place to live. I do think the work on the Inclusion Commission is really, really important. As a part of that, we should be looking at income inequalities and power inequalities, and I know that's something that is happening. And, you know, thanks to my colleague, Councillor Amanda Pinnock, for the work that she's done initially on the Commission, and then also the work of the group leaders going forward as well. So I think that's all I wanted to say for now, but, you know, I do want to say again how important it is that the work that frontline staff did, and we must recognise that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Upall. Councillor Ramsey.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I cancelled my idea to speak, but I'll do it anyway. So, really, I mean, there's a lot of things that I agree with about changing working practices and about how the impact of austerity has had a role to play in what's happening. But looking forward, one of the things that I am very aware of in our community, and Shabir, you asked us about our community, is the way the community came together. And I was part of a very good organisation, which was an umbrella organisation for about 6 different groups, and we are still going to carry on working. We have decided that the inequalities have been exacerbated, that we need to continue working. Different parts of us, in different parts of those organisations, are going to do things like Bereavement Cafe. I know the title isn't right, but a soup kitchen. But this is the kind of work that needs to happen in the ground. And I would be saying, on behalf of the community organisations, the council gets great value for money. A lot of it's from people kind of my age, just retired, lots of energy, want to do something that's really good. And I would be recommending that we use those community organisations as well as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Ramsey. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think the presentation gives us an accurate flavour of the scale and complexity of the tasks of the recovery challenges. Thank you for presenting that to us. I disagree with the leader. I think there is party politics involved in this. I think to suppose otherwise is probably not useful. I demonstrate by just picking one example, and this refers to slides 2 and 5 more than anything else, and that's people and inclusion. When we talk about recovery from COVID for children, we cannot limit that recovery to the narrow spectrum of academic attainment. Far more has been lost by a whole cohort of children who endured the lockdown, socialising, sport, art, drama, music, how to interact with adults other than their own parents, assessing risks on school walks. The list goes on, and all have been impaired, despite the fantastic efforts of our schools and teachers, and let's not forget our parents. To counter some of this loss, the government's Education Recovery Commissioner, Kevin Collins, this June requested £15 billion to meet the scale of the catch-up challenge. The request was met with a sum of £1.4 billion, a tenth of what was needed. This wasn't a figure picked out of the air either. It was echoing what was already being estimated by education policy groups. The Conservative government have shown that they can spend on COVID, and I have no doubt that they will spend on COVID recovery. On this case, though, we've shown that they can spend, but they won't spend on this particular matter, on the catch-up issue. Until Conservative councillors, Conservative-led councils, and MPs start making a noise about this, then the issues in slide 5 of inclusivity, making sure that nobody is left behind, will only deteriorate and the gap widen. We know that those worse off are least able to take advantage of financial recoveries. It happens every time. Only this time, there is some predicted permanent scarring to the economy that will put further hurdles in the way of these families. Council can and must do its bit, that's assured. Our group suggested at the last budget that some spending was deferred to allow spending on children with mental health issues, and the administration's efforts must be acknowledged, as must the government's to date. This, though, is the heft of government behind it. One-off borrowing is cheap right now, and the risks of not spending in this area far outweigh the comparative costs. These effects are already being felt. My son is probably of a similar age to the leader's daughter, but it's conceivable that the youngest in school now and preschool during the lockdown will be leaving education in 15 years' time, still suffering from the consequences of missed opportunities. I would urge those in the chamber with parliamentary influence to use it so that Generation COVID gets a fair shake. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor David Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to limit my comments to what Kirklees can achieve for our residents. And it seems to me that some of the ambitions that have been stated in there, in fact, all the ambitions can be split into two camps. And the first is to do with partnership. Because on the very first slide, we were talking about developing community capacity and networks. We were talking about understanding physical and mental health impacts. The issue of children, which is very, very important. Promoting employment and economic recovery. Now, these things are all very worthy, and they have to be done, but they cannot be done by the council alone. And it is so important that we rebuild partnerships now, and that we make partnerships where before they were not very good. In contrast to that, there are some things in here which we need to do ourselves, and we have to grasp the nettle and get these things done. And the first is better outcomes for customers, and this should be written big in everything that we do. Lots of things didn't get done last year, understandably maybe because of COVID, and we must look at what didn't get done. We must look at the backlog. We must quantify it, and we should make sure that things get done this year. There will be a temptation over the next few months to come up with a way of working which will be to the convenience of councillors and officers. And we must try and just keep that at arm's length for the time being, because our focus needs to be on the residents of Kirklees. Every resident of Kirklees, both those that have been affected by COVID and those that haven't, both the vulnerable and those that just expect a basic service. Another thing that was in there, which I do agree with, is about frontline workers' flexibility. And this reminds me of a time not very long ago, actually, when I was trying to get a white line painted. A 3-yard white line outside a garage. And the complainant was saying that people are always blocking him in. He can't get out. He can't open his garage door because people park there. And I said, I think it's reasonable that we get you a white line outside your garage. And I had it signed off by officers, that's fine. Now, a few months later, I chased it up and couldn't find any record of this. So I went to the man that paints the white lines and I said, do you know anything about my white line? Oh, he says, yes, but I can't paint it because I haven't got the proper paperwork. I said, right, who do I need to speak to? So he passed me on to his superior. And I talked to his superior, who passed me on to a finance man, who then passed me on to the superior in the finance office. And all that was needed apparently was a pink piece of paper. And when this pink piece of paper got through to the man on the ground, he would paint the white line. This is just an example, really, of where we need the flexibility, because I would like to see a time coming when I, as a councillor, could actually just ring the man with the pot of white paint and say, we really need this doing, it's agreed to be done, can you come and do it? And he would say, yeah, absolutely fine, no problem, I'll come and do it for you. This is where we're getting, the customer service is falling through. So all this needs to, I suppose, be like a stick of rock that you get from the seaside. And through the middle of it needs to be customer service. Let's push the residents of Kirklees first over these next few months and always, and do all that we can to make sure that the services that we're offering are really fit and are actually what the residents deserve. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Homewood, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief comment, really. I think it's important that we're talking about COVID recovery, but it did just chime with me while I was listening to it that we're not actually through the pandemic yet, and I think we need to bear that in mind. I think, I'm not sure the exact figures today, but it's something getting on for 40,000 cases of COVID a day. Deaths have increased a little bit, and so hospitalisations have increased. And so my reflection was just that within our COVID plan, COVID recovery, I think we need to think about almost our recovery through COVID, and we also need to think about how we're going to deal with those situations if the worst does happen. We hope things continue to get better and progress that way, but we don't know that's going to be the case. And so some of the things that I'm thinking about, what we should be considering is, we know that we've got a lot of our vulnerable residents who had their COVID vaccinations in January, February time. We still don't understand fully what the science is telling us around how long that's going to protect people for, whether that protection is waning at all, and whether those people will get booster vaccinations, whether those boosters will work. And I think we need to be thinking about that. And even if they do work, how quickly can be delivered to people? So I think, our plans around things like care homes, how do we make sure the situation that occurred in care homes 18 months ago doesn't happen again in another wave of COVID if vaccines aren't working? I think that's something that's really important. Also thinking about schools as well. So we've had the experience of the difficulties when schools were closed, how we responded to that, and the equipment that children needed, the free school meals and things. Do we have a plan in place? If that happens again, how we'll respond to that? So really, it was just for me to say, agree with a lot of what my colleagues are saying about the recovery. but let's build into that recovery how we'll react and be agile, I guess, if it doesn't all go smoothly and the recovery doesn't go smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Homewood. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to say thank you to Rachel Spencer-Henshaw for that presentation. For me, I know we've all got different ideals, but we're mapping a future in a coordinated manner, and it's by your contribution that things will be coordinated. We're acknowledging the past 18 months. Many of us have experienced things, but I do want to acknowledge our workers, our officers, citizens and groups, the voluntary sector, and all the charities out there. And I can't say it enough that we should be proud of what we've done working together. The key words that were out there in that presentation were people, partners, place. Place is the most important thing, but partners, that means councillors as well, not just partnerships in organisations. There's a mention of digital inclusion, but I don't want us to lose sight for people that don't have digital. We have to ensure that them inequalities are addressed, that we target them as well. It's about inclusion and addressing all inequalities. I want to touch on the recruitment. We have to be honest with ourselves. There's not just this council competing for people and staff. It's happening across the country. There's a shortage of staff. Succession planning has gone out of the window because COVID has impacted. And as Councillor Homewood has rightly pointed out, I'd actually written it, don't talk about COVID over. COVID is still here, alive and kicking. Now, one of the experiences I want to share with you tonight is bereavement, and it's bereavement poverty. I've had several of this in my ward, and more people are contacting me for help because they can't afford to bury their parents, the children, and that is worrying to me. We need to target that. But I think as we're looking at the recovery plan, for me, and I just want to talk about it, and I'm not politicking, it's this £20 uplift on universal credit. It ends at the end of September. This is going to have an inevitable impact on this council. There's going to be rent arrears, evictions, there's going to be a homelessness increase. We've already got the pressure of over 15,000 applications for housing. That is a sad story state. There's going to be more demands on mental health and the services, and pressures on all services out there. I just want to say, though, about this £20 precept, please don't be deluded that people just went out spending it willy-nilly. They spent it on necessities, food, heat. So I think whilst we're thinking about all what we're doing, be mindful, because this is going to have a massive impact on 43,000 people in Kirklees when they lose that, and it's going to also affect the economy to £44 million loss. So bear that in mind. And I think the contribution so far has been brilliant, and I think we need to continue mapping our way, as I said earlier, out of this. But COVID remains with us for a long time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Just a reminder, this item is 60 minutes. I have 6 other people on the list. You are not all going to get to speak when this item finishes at 8 o'clock. So, just a reminder. Councillor Mather next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. COVID for me has been very personal. It's been personal because it's not out there, it's within. So for when the statistics say underlying conditions and BME communities, I know how it feels. I can count, and the last number I counted was about 20 people I know as relatives and my very, very nearest and dearest friends. COVID has thrown up challenges we never thought we would have to deal with. and the impact of it's going to be with us for a very, very long time. Now, my portfolio deals with frontline services. So I want to be heard loud and clear. I am very proud of our frontline staff. They went above and beyond in delivering whilst we were isolating at home or we couldn't go out. They were there for us, our communities, and they've done a sterling job. Let it not be said that we've forgotten the contributions they make. They too have families. So when we say that the potholes, the line drawings, the weeds on the footpath haven't been done, we're not dealing with robots. They too are pinged to isolate, shield at the beginning, and it's beginning to go up again. So for our staff, their wellness, without them, we're nothing. We cannot deliver, delivery of services. We cannot do that without them. So their wellness and well-being is key. And how do you do that? By acknowledging, by appreciating, and by praising, not berating, because in this chamber, we're living in a borough with 420,000 plus citizens, the 7th largest in the country. If we come up with a handful of things not done, it's not a statistic. I'm not saying we can't do better, but we really have to rein in and realize where we live. I'm proud to be a citizen of Kirklees. Whilst I'm on this, the work-life balance also impacts on councillors. And some of my opposition colleagues have said that, how much casework. And Lord, I'm feeling it myself. I can hardly lift my arm because sitting in front of the computer from 9 till 9 is no fun. And when you are with your family, you're no good. So back to frontline services, I am very, very proud to say that we have been shortlisted for 3 APSI awards: refuse collection, environmental services, and catering. And it's excellence, and I'm hoping tomorrow we will bring all of them home. So that's how good Kirklees is during this pandemic. We need to recognise what Councillor Uppel said: national politics' impact on local outcomes. The inequality gap is increasing. Whilst we can say the government did its best, it wasn't good enough. So, for example, £32 billion wiped off track and trace. Nobody knows what happened. We spent £32 billion over 20 years whilst we were fighting in Afghanistan. So
30 seconds, Councillor Mather.
So all I'm saying is we need to build on our strengths, listen to our communities, build great partnerships and places we can all be proud of. But mental wellness is a key to all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Councillor Pattison.
Thank you, Mayor. I just very briefly want to talk about customer services in the education world in Kirklees. Can I remind you, our schools never closed. We had staff working throughout the pandemic in our schools. Teachers, caretakers, cleaners, catering staff, etc. Many staff didn't have a break for that first year. No holidays whatsoever, contrary to what people often think about teachers. They've had to learn all sorts of new skills. About hygiene. I mean, obviously they know about hygiene, but they never had to be a sanitaire or had to be a builder or had to be a planner or all sorts of things that they've had to learn. They had to collaborate with all those services that did come in to support them, building services. Do you know how quickly even our building services got into schools and put all those, and not just our schools, is it? But put all those barriers up, all those screens up and moved things around and did all the measuring. I mean, they really went above and beyond. And schools made better links with the community as well, because they had to, working with the voluntary sector to help ensure that all our children were kept safe. And then another positive that's also come out, schools collaborated with each other across the different sectors, across academies and maintained schools and voluntary aided schools. And so much work went on in the background of all of that, besides providing all that new type of education over Zoom and all the rest of it. They were working really hard in the school community to make sure it happened. But despite all that work, and they did still find time to do other things as well, to improve things, to improve the way that we deliver special educational needs. There's a new learning strategy about achievement, which will be very shortly coming to Cabinet for hopefully approval. There's a new inclusion strategy. We've looked at, I mean, the pandemic has taught us so much about how our communities need to work together. And then, in terms of real frontline customer service, there's not one service that I'm aware of where the staff haven't met, maybe right at the end of the day, but they've got all those kids into schools. They've arranged all those kids having a new school. They've arranged visits in terms of home-educated children. They've arranged visits to see children with special educational needs. They've all happened. And just today, right at the last moment, we've opened a new school as well. And that's been being built all the way through the pandemic. And the contractors there and staff from the council have been really working hard to make sure that it met the deadline, their target of opening that new school today. So despite pandemic, there's been lots of positives come out of it, and we still have, albeit sometimes right at the last moment, we've still delivered that customer service within education. Thank you.
Sorry? Yes? Yes, thank you. Yes, I did note that. Councillor Bolt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Councillor Watson for pointing out the point that I was going to start off with, that recovery, whilst we can reflect, we should be looking forward. And it's useful for members on the floor to look forward, Mr. Mayor, to look at the logo behind you. The motto of Kirklees is "Together we serve," and it comes back to what Councillor Watson said at the start. This council is about service delivery, service provision. Sadly, in many cases, what I've experienced, and members of the public, is the anagram that former Councillor Gordon North once told me. That turns around to "get here we swerve," because often people try and manipulate things not to the direction that was ordained, but to the direction that they want it to go in. We still have a silo mentality in this council. Looking forward, we asked a question just before K&H became Khan of why we need to rebrand a council service. Why do council vehicles need to be repainted? Why do we need to buy new uniforms that said Kirklees, Homes and Neighbourhood unless Councillor Khan was seeking that across everything that we do. Why not just say Kirklees Council, one vision, so that the staff and other people don't say, that's not me. We raise things with planning officers. That's not me, that's somebody else. When you're talking about a planning application, no, it's not you. So in recovery, we need to be looking at efficiency. We need to be looking, as we've talked about the environment. And these lovely bottles that I see of water, we are still feeding the coffers of North Yorkshire. Harrogate Water. Mr. Mayor, I put it to my colleague from Kirkburton, will you invite the Mayor to go visit the excellent water plant in Kirkburton? Shepley Springs Water. We have a Kirklees business that can provide a service with a less impact on the environment. I'm sure Mr. Battersby, as a director in North Yorkshire, is happy that their economy is doing well, but shouldn't we be seeing the local economy? In paying tribute, Mr. Mayor, to what has happened and what's going forward, I pay tribute to the many community groups in Murfield, such as Murfield in Bloom, who during all the pandemic were bringing people together, enhancing our community, cleaning up the verges. Often when Kirklees staff were saying, don't do that unless you've got permission and you need a road closure to cut the grass at the side of a footway. Mr. Mayor, groups such as this have empowered our community, they've encouraged them, and they've enabled our community to maintain their sense of pride. And it's worth noting that Murfield in Bloom, Mr. Mayor, is not just Murfield in Bloom. This year, it is the Yorkshire in Bloom entry into Britain in Bloom. Therefore, it represents not Murfield, but Yorkshire and, Mr. Mayor, Kirklees. Excellent. We've seen community groups helping during the crisis, taking hot food to people, company, and assisting people. So, we've been told earlier on by Councillor McBride when responding to members of the public, status quo is not an option. And I agree, Peter. Let's see things change. Let's see things get more efficient. So it may need the leader to turn this juggernaut and make it operate differently. And Mr. Mayor, I'll go further. I'll agree with Councillor Mather. When someone says, I did my best, but it's not good enough, we have to be honest and say, you're right, Naheed, your best wasn't good enough and you need to do better. You're right to the planning officers, your best wasn't good enough. Mr. Mayor, we need change. We need the status quo to operate so that we don't get the situation where this council gives a wealthy offshore developer a free pass on £500,000 they should have contributed towards the Cooper Bridge Road scheme because the developer said their multi-million-pound Murfield 25 development was not economically viable. They've just sold it to another company, so it must be doing something, Mr. Mayor. Yet this council gave them £500,000 holiday. This council's planning department also, Mr. Mayor, lost £80,000, which should have gone to a school in Murfield, because planning officers didn't collect it.
10 seconds, Councillor Ball.
Why, Shabir, won't you give those schools in Murfield that money they need? Status quo, we're a good pop group, but for a council, it's not acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolt. I'm afraid we don't have time for any more speakers. The allocated time of 60 minutes is up. And I will move to the next agenda item, which is item 9. So page 27, Resources and Waste Strategy 2021 to 2030, reference from Cabinet. We'll now watch a short video, and following that, Councillor Mather will present the report. Okay, you do it the other way around, it's different on my piece of paper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am pleased to bring to Council our Resources and Waste Strategy for approval so that officers can start to design the business plans which will sit below, ready to deliver. From the outset, it has had positive support on its journey, from the hugely successful consultation with our residents last year, who told us precisely what they wanted, through to scrutiny, through to all the political groups, and then to Cabinet end of July. The subject matter has captured the imagination and ideas which were put forward throughout the whole process. So last year, Kirklees Council invited its residents to share their views on waste and recycling in the borough. Over 7,000 residents, despite COVID, despite being online, took part in the engagement, helping to inform how recycling and waste could be dealt with across Kirklees. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the officers who worked on this strategy, all our residents, and all my colleagues who are present for their full participation in the process, which has enabled our officers to produce this very innovative strategy. This is against a backdrop of the government stalling on delivering its own national waste strategy and the Environment Bill. But we have decided locally to press ahead and deliver the changes our residents have emphatically told us they want. The strategy sets out our ambitions for the next decade and will shape our procurement for the new waste contract as we strive to turn Kirklees into one of the best performing waste authorities across the UK by 2030. So together we can reach a carbon neutral Kirklees. The strategy will look to change how we manage our waste and will start to take effect immediately, with a programme of key deliverables over the next 12 months detailed in the strategy at page 29. These include food waste workshops, a composting scheme, and reuse shop launched in Huddersfield. I would now like to ask for a video animation presentation to be made, which talks for itself, and it's a short animation of 2.5 minutes. Thank you.
Kirklees Resources and Waste Strategy. Our vision: a clean, green, sustainable future for Kirklees with zero waste to landfill and where waste is valued as a resource through reuse, recycling and recovery. Our ambitions: how we will achieve zero waste to landfill. To minimise the amount of waste we produce and maximise recycling, we must all work together. Free food waste workshops will help residents make the most of what they buy and reduce waste. A network of volunteer local recycling champions will help provide advice and guidance to their local community on reducing, reusing and recycling waste. Over 2,000 children and young people took part in the Our Voice Climate Festival in March 2021, so we know they are passionate about recycling. We're launching a new commercial recycling service to businesses, schools and charities across the district. We also offer additional support to schools. We will be trialling a reuse shop in Huddersfield where items from HWRCs which could be reused can be sold to others to promote reuse instead of disposal. We're introducing a composting scheme where residents can purchase cutting-edge composters at a reduced price. We will improve litter facilities across Kirklees with more recycling bins than ever. A new bulky waste collection system will allow you to book a slot for collection on a date to suit you. Improvements to the fly tipping service will make sure fly tipping is cleared quicker. To make sure we get things right for all residents, we're going to run a trial on curbside glass collections. And it doesn't stop there. Our new strategy covers more, including more recyclable materials collected at the curbside, the Huddersfield Heat Network, and a community reward scheme. The Full Resources and Waste Strategy 2021 to 2030 sets out our ambitions for the future in more detail. Together we can reach a carbon neutral Kirklees. To find out more, visit our website www.kirklees.gov.uk/waste strategy.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that animation. It enables those of us that didn't get around to reading it, it brings it to light. So I would like to move that Kirklees Resource and Waste Strategy 2021 to 2030 be adopted.
Is that seconded? Any comments on this matter? Councillor Marchington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, just again, it's appropriate to say thank you to the amount of time that's been put in with the on the strategy. I think we had a meeting with our group, an online meeting with some of the officers. It was quite exciting, and I quite enjoyed that. And there's some interesting stuff in there. And you know, the Huddersfield Heat Network, that was great. You know, when that was picked up at scrutiny, and understand that the officers really understood about that, and we can push that forward. And we look forward to seeing that being implemented. Glass recycling, curbside collection, numbers will be happy about that. Fly tipping, better ways of dealing with fly tipping to give that a more positive experience for our residents and for our communities. I'm a little bit disappointed though, you'd expect, might be expect, that we could, it's about that vision, and you know, net zero is not an end point. We need to get to carbon negative if we're going to, you know, reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's what we're going to have to do. And at the moment, we're just sort of slowing things down a bit. A couple of things that I brought up, which haven't been included in the strategy, were about reuse and local reuse of recycled materials, or materials. I think particularly around plastic. And we've seen elsewhere in the world where we've got really cutting-edge waste collection strategies, and I've used it before, and I would like to see something, like Norway. So there's an obligation on, a lot of you who've been to Europe will have seen the reverse vending machines. You put your plastic bottles in, you get a little token out. But in Norway, that plastic has to be recycled locally, used locally. It's encouraged local remanufacture of that. So I love the workshops and the local composting, all that. There's great stuff happening in Home Firth with colleagues. Where's Paul? Yeah, Home Firth, yeah, good stuff happening with them, and that's the way to go through. But actually, what happens in Norway is it's done on an industrial scale. You know, it's just directed by central government. This is what you must do, and everybody does it. And there's a cost associated with it, but the cost associated with all that is minimal compared to the benefits. I think the other thing I would like to see around reuse, and again, it would oblige companies to reuse materials and recycle stuff locally rather than shipping it elsewhere. You know, an obligation on supermarkets to take back the plastic that they issue. I get increasingly embarrassed now. In fact, I've changed my shopping habits about taking plastic. I mean, it's good stuff. You need plastic because it protects food and reduces food spoilage. So there's a balanced argument there. But when I take plastic off something, I feel embarrassed about it. So I've tried to change my shopping habits. And I have got to start getting a significant amount of our fruit and veg in paper bags now. It's only a little thing, but that's a stage. But actually, if supermarkets were obliged to take back the packaging, and it's a central government thing, you know, it's not Kirklees, because if we do that in Kirklees, who's going to nip over, if you live on the edges of Kirklees, who's going to nip over into Bradford and Calderdale to do your shopping where you're not having to do that? It's a government could do that, and it would mean that there's an obligation on supermarkets, particularly with own-branded goods and their relationship with manufacturers, to reduce the packaging. We've talked about it for decades now, but if they're obliged to do it, we do it. And it's happened in Germany, it's happened in Sweden, it's happened all over Europe, Spain, Portugal. They just get on with it. And can we see that happening? And again, look at, we talked about the recovery, the green recovery from COVID. There are manufacturing companies in and around Kirklees who could be repurposing this material. And again, one of the exciting things I saw, I mean, Greg, I don't know if you watch the factory with Greg Wallace, Mr. Enthusiastic, you know. And I know our colleague Paula Davis from Almonbury, you know, we've talked in a group about food-grade plastics and what it needs to be. Well, on there, they actually were recycling plastics to food-grade standard and reusing it in that. And there's a cost associated with it. So I think Longley Farm yogurts, a bit of advert for Longley Farm yogurts, the best yogurts that I've tasted around. We've got a big stack of plastic yogurt pots. What do we have to do? We have to take them back to Sainsbury's or whatever. But actually, it would be really good if that plastic was manufactured in Kirklees in the first place, reused in Kirklees in the first place, and actually if that could be done elsewhere, so people who are buying Longley Farm yogurts or manufacturing their own yogurts, they could do that. And it's that sort of visional thinking that we could look at doing that piloting or put infrastructure locally, but then encouraging this to happen across the whole of the country and our influence on town. And that's where Kirklees used to be. You know, Kirklees Kirklees Council represented a local government association at the Rio Climate Conference. That's where we were, that's where we want to be. And I think some of that, we're nice to see a bit of that in our waste strategy. So for the sake of our own residents, but also to encourage others to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marchington. Councillor Smage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I thought I was in for a long wait. Thank you for the strategy. I would like to understand what the word ongoing means in your milestones. Does that mean that they never finish or you never get there? Or does it mean that you are aiming for a particular time frame when you will have those items concluded? Just, you know me and my time frames. Okay. But I would like to ask about your recycling sites. The recycling sites information says that you're going to redevelop and refurbish sites, modernise them, refresh signage, improve traffic flow, etc. All of that to be welcomed, but the word accessibility is not in there. And for many who live in North Kirklees, accessibility within the household waste and recycling sites is important. Nab Lane in Birstall, you have to go up steps to get to put things in the bins. And people who would recycle and who would take things to the centres may not necessarily be able to do that because of accessibility issues. And therefore, the word accessibility is important in this respect. Fly tipping, I understand you're having a better approach to enforcement. But in our ward, we have hotspots for fly tipping. Hotspots, like I'm sure everybody has, hotspots where it never seems to get solved. And what we get is that, well, we've no street lights in that area. Well, no, they're lanes, they won't have street lights, so we can't have cameras. Do you know of any street lights or anything is the question we get asked. But if there was a definite strategy for the hotspots, which involved budgets as well, we could maybe sort out those fly tipping hotspots and not keep having the recurring costs of keep going time and time again to clear them. Because I'm sure everybody can name places in their ward which they report time and time again. And we need a strategy to sort that out rather than thinking in the short term. The reuse shop is there nothing for North Kirklees? Because I think it's a long way for many to Huddersfield. And your review of street sweeping, street sweeping is important for everyone. And I hope that that review does not result in street sweeping for a few places and not for everybody. But one point I would have made under the other item was about talking to people. People need to talk to people even more now than they did previously. A lot of services have moved on online, etc., by necessity. But people want to feel that their complaint is being listened to and actioned upon. And therefore, please do not follow we're going online for everything. We need to have services available so that people can interact with people, because that is important. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smage. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm sure some of you may be surprised that I really enjoyed going through the presentation and thought there was many, many good points and strategies in there. And being a stickler for numbers and figures, I did pick up on a couple of things that may help, and I hope you don't take the people that have written this presentation, the people that are involved, that this is not a criticism. This is just picking up on some figures that I and maybe some other people would like clarity on. One of the dreams and aspirations in recycling was to improve the recycling rate to 70% by 2025, which is admirable. Later on in the presentation, on the projected graph, it states that the aspiration is 55% as far as the recycling rate by 2025. So it would be nice to have clarity on whether the projected graph or the outcomes list is the correct figure. Is it 70% or is it 55%? The 70%, again, a magical figure for the residents of Kirklees, is a 40% increase in the recycling rate of our average over the last 12 years. And that would be a 130% increase in productivity in recycling over the next 4 years. Our rate of recycling has fallen steadily over the last 12 years. And I know that some could make certain excuses of what's happened over that period of time, but if we do look, like one of my colleagues and a councillor did say, that we can't ignore what's happening nationally as far as local is concerned. So if we do look nationally, and we look at the figures, we're 18% below the national average as far as recycling, and have been on average over those 12, 14 years, 18%. So if we are to achieve these figures, there is many, many improvements, many, many things to change. Because not only have we got to get to what the national average is, where we've failed by 18% per annum on recycling, but then we've decided to go for 70%, which is 30% over the national average. So there is a lot to do. I mean, the numbers over a 4-year period to go from 18% below national average to 30% above. There's a lot of work there for the cabinet members in charge of this particular project, and the officers and the subcontractors, as far as sewers is concerned, are going to have to change probably everything that you could possibly think of that's happened and is happening, and the strategies and the workload that they're going through at the moment would need a complete overhaul and review, not just putting lessons in place for children or recycling bins at a discounted rate. There is an awful
awful lot here to do. And what I'd like to discuss is one of the things that we did get wrong a little while ago, which was, I believe, the permit system. If you look at the permit system as a statistic on the graph, our production fell by a good few %. And it was also a time where we could see a massive increase in fly tipping. So we've not only got to change everything, we've got to make sure that everything that we implement has been tried and tested either somewhere else or that we're sure that we can move forward with the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got 3 or 4 speakers, and if we are to complete the rest of the business, I'm going to have to shorten this item. I hope you will appreciate that. So I'm going to cut the item off after Councillor Taylor. So Councillor Lawson, Councillor Cooper, and then Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor, for not cutting me off. I would just comment, Councillor Bolt, that you're a W short in your anagram. So, I know this strategy is wider than just recycling, but there is no thing as just recycling. It underpins the whole strategy. And if we get it wrong, then everything else will be of secondary value at best. According to the latest Household Waste Recycling League tables, Kirklees is currently 320 out of the 341 English councils, with a fairly average-looking waste collection per person, but a very low household rate of 26% compared with the highest of 64.1% at Three Rivers. Statistical neighbours Rochdale managed nearly twice ours at 49.9%. So we can't claim some kind of north-south divide for the poor performance. It's something that this council has brought about, and that's where we are. So a strategy of this kind is long overdue, but now it's here. We hope it succeeds. That said, the stated ambitions in the forward seem a little bit timid and in couched terms. So we've got 55% of municipal waste by 2025. We've got 70% of from waste centres, which is better, but I still feel as though there's room to push that because we're actually in control of those waste centres, and there's less of it. It's brought waste, so it's less of a random element in that. And reuse and recycle as much as possible from bulky waste. Now, as much as possible is like, it's a little bit vague, it's a little bit wishy-washy. And these do sound like good ambitions, I suppose, from where we are, but what will authority standards be in 4 years' time? And will we get left behind again? Shouldn't we be looking to be the ones who set benchmarks as we have in the past, rather than be happy to trail behind? The fact, with the Environment Bill imminent, we could find ourselves falling behind in other aspects. It looks clear in the bill that we will be required to put food waste strategy in place before long. Now, to do with that, I've raised a particular warning at Cabinet about being careful not to rush into investing in biodigesters for our own use. We must be careful not to commodify waste and end up feeding the beast with a dwindling supply of material. That will leave us poor value for money, investment and risk us being contractually obliged to supply material, much as we are, I believe, with the incinerator at the moment. Much better that we share any such investment and risk with our neighbours. And I think the last thing that I'd want to pick up is the action plan, particularly page 84, 5.2, waste and recycling collections. The first couple of points are fine, but then we see more materials accepted in green bins with a tentative date on 22. I'd want to know why that was tentative. People are crying out to be able to put more materials in their bins. Their neighbours can in neighbouring authorities, and they don't really understand why that's the case here. With a separate glass collection in 2024, that seems pretty inconceivable why that should be that case. And the food waste collection for 2025. Now, as I've just said, facts may overtake us, events may overtake us there. We have to be ready to sort of roll that out as quickly as possible and as soon as possible. So, Mr. Mayor, while the waste strategy is absolutely the right thing to be doing, if we were looking for ambition, drive and pace, then the recycling aspect of the strategy falls flat. The hard work that has been put into the production of this strategy seems to have been watered down by a lack of desire to lead the way as an authority. My one last comment, promise, is about the onward journey of our recycling. And we don't want it ending up in rivers in Vietnam, and we don't want people who are non-regulated in their workforces having control over this waste, well, making money out of our waste and not looking after their workforce. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Lawson. Councillor Cooper.
I heard Councillor Bolt earlier on talking about why is it we're using Harrogate spring water when there's Shepley spring water that we could have instead. Oh, there's tap water here. It's tap water. You know, no bottles. You can't. Thank you for the staff providing it, but tap water is what we need. Not plastic bottles, not plastic cups, not glass bottles. Stuff that comes out of a tap. We have actually in the past passed motions at this council saying we wouldn't have any more bottled water. It keeps coming back. I don't understand it. I just really don't understand it. I wonder why it keeps coming back. And getting these little things right shows that we're leading. We talk here about leading by example. This is a basic thing. If we can't get this basic thing right, then it's a concern. There's all the transport and resources involved with that movement. There we go. But I'll talk about the conflict and the relationship between recycling and incineration. Recycling, we've heard a lot about the issues about, do we have faith? Do we have faith that when people put something in a bin feeling really good about themselves, I've put this in the green bin, I've washed it out, I've done all these things to it, and they've carefully packaged it and put it away. What happens to it? And confidence is so important with this whole process. The confidence that their good act, the fact that they have behaved as a responsible citizen results in a positive action and that it doesn't end up in Vietnam. So actually making sure that people know that from the end-to-end process we have looked after that item, we've worked with the companies there, and they have assured us and shown us and demonstrated to us in a quality-assured fashion that they've dealt with that waste responsibly is important. And incineration, the bin in the sky. We've actually got to look at incineration and see is that going to be the easy place for a lot of those carefully recycled high carbon items to go into, those high hydrocarbons that are involved with the creation of plastic? Ooh, that burns really well. And how much of that stuff actually ends up going in the incinerator? It's not an incinerator, Councillor Cooper, it's an energy from waste plant. Okay, fair enough. So transparency is really important here in our relationship with our waste. Transparency about what happens with it and showing the citizens what's happened to the stuff that they put in, not just recycling, what's gone into incineration, and making sure we understand that, because confidence is key. Bulky waste collections. I and my colleagues, Karen and Sue, we are active fly tippers and getting fly tippers. No, don't quote me. We're active people who clear up fly tipping and get involved in it. God, blooming heck. Go on, put it on a leaflet, I dare you. And so there's some. One of the things which really concerns us this time of year is mattress season. A lot of the time, isn't it, Karen? Mattress season, and somehow or other around this time of year, new mattresses appear. And students are beginning to appear in new houses, apparently with new mattresses a lot of the time, which is really nice. But somehow or other, loads of blooming mattresses appear being dumped all over the place, around and about. We are so keen to get fly tippers prosecuted. And we provide we go through some pretty stinky bags every now and again, don't we, Karen? We do. And we find this stuff and we pursue them and actually have got some things. But we do not actually hear from Kirklees very much about the successful prosecutions that have happened. We need to know more about this. We need to make examples of people. We need to make sure that people know that there are consequences if they do bad stuff.
20 seconds.
And do that. So, yep, just a few thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Taylor. John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and keep this short. I feel like I've spent all year this year talking rubbish, but some of you might think it's longer than that. But I have, and I would just like to thank the officers that have done an excellent job at bringing councillors with them on this journey as this strategy has been developed. I think this is probably about the 6th or 7th time I've been involved in discussions around the waste strategy. So I do welcome that, and I think it's worth recognising that's the way to engage us. I would just echo Councillor Lawson's comments about being ambitious, and that'd be my one criticism of this, is I'm not sure it's ambitious enough. And then just a few other little comments, because as I say, I've talked a lot of rubbish this year, and probably have fed back most stuff that I would say here. There's just one, I'm always drawn to language, and on page 84 as part of the action plan, it talks about internal education for councillors and MPs. Now, I'm sure there's a number of us that might think there are some councillors and MPs who do need some education, but I just think perhaps that language could be softened a little if this is being used or communicated elsewhere. I also think we should be more ambitious about the name that we call our recycling and waste advisors, because that sounds really dull, but champions or advocates or something that's a bit more positive that would give them a greater sense of the purpose that they're undertaking. So again, language, but let's pick that up. And then just on the community reward scheme, I like the idea. I'm just a little worried that it could be seen by some people that it's rewarding people who haven't tried very hard in the past. Because what it talks about is rewarding communities that have the highest increase in recycling, which obviously then goes, well, if that community there was doing a good job recycling already, they probably can't increase it by a great deal. So they'd be disadvantaged. And we've talked a lot about inclusion. We've talked a lot about making sure that we treat everybody fairly. So I just think, I get the idea, I'm fully supportive of it, but I just think we need to think through how we would implement that in perhaps a more effective way. And I'll just finish by saying we are in a strange position, aren't we, at the moment? And I think the officers have done well in trying to navigate that uncertainty. We're coming to the end of the contract with Suez, and we're having to negotiate a new contract with Suez or an extension or whatever we decide to do. We have the Environment Bill that is going through Parliament, and we need to make sure that we're aware of any changes that might come in from left field at the last minute in that as well. So I think there are still some ambiguities that are still in play, but overall I think this is taking us in the right direction. I would ask you to think again about being more ambitious. And my final point, and I have mentioned this before, and I'm going to try and find the page now. There's a graph. Can't find the... there's a graph that shows the growth. Here we go. Our challenges on the recycling rates on page 49. Now, I'm sorry, but this isn't very convincing. If you're going to have a graph that shows your ambition, you ought to be showing what the steps between now and then are, because nobody will be confident that you can jump from 26.7 to 55% without some steps along the way. So you need to flesh that out, and underneath put what is it that is changing that is going to deliver that step increase over the next few years. And I just think, you know, if we were to go public and say, this is our ambition, this is how we're going to achieve, it just doesn't have credibility, I'm afraid. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Simpson, you reserved the right, but do you still want to speak? Because we're not going to get all these items through if you do. Well, sorry? Councillor Mather, then.
Thank you for receiving the waste strategy so positively. What I can say is it is ambitious, it is transparent, it is, as Councillor Taylor saying, we're in a unique position where we're looking forward with things happening at the side and we don't want to go too fast and miss things out. So what we need to hold on to, I made the notes, is hold on to the fact that strategy is an umbrella heading below which will sit the business plans which will take us step by step to achieving our ambitions, because it's very, very difficult to work on a dossier with everything in. This is just an overall ambition. So I am asking colleagues in this chamber to actually enable us to move forward by approving this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. We will now go to the vote. I'm going to try a show of hands first, because it's quicker. And if this doesn't work, we'll go to a roll call. All those in favour? All those against? All those abstaining? That's carried. Thank you. Item 10 then. Item 10, page 97, Financial Outturn Report 2020-2021. Councillor Paul Davis.
Mr Mayor, I'm very tempted just to say move to recommendation, but I do have a few comments, so I'll try and be as brief as possible. This is a high-level financial outturn report for 2020-21. It incorporates the annual review of Treasury management performance, and of course this is presented on an annual basis to Council. It goes without saying that 2020-21 has been a totally unprecedented and challenging year from a financial management and a Treasury management perspective. And this is certainly reflected in the report. And it should be noted that services spent an additional 49 million in year on COVID-related spend. And we also paid out some 144 million in business grant support to 11,000 eligible businesses. COVID impacted service income loss totaled 15 million, and underlying local tax income losses were at 10.5 million. And again, this is reflected within the report. There was a significant additional government funding for COVID and for our efforts, with a range of grant support, and once again, you'll find this summarised in the appendices. With regard to our year-end reserves position, this has increased, but this is largely reflected of 2020-21 COVID-related funding being rolled forward into 2021-22. So most of this will be applied in 2021-22 to mitigate continuing COVID-related financial pressures. And overall, we delivered a break-even position on general fund net revenue budget of 275 million. So a few other items just to pick out from the report. The HRA deficit, 2.6 million. About half of this is due to an increase in HRA asset depreciation charge, and half a mix of mainly COVID cost and income pressures. In-year DSG deficit pressure is at 10.7 million, and this is mainly high needs. And the DSG deficit at year-end, 25 million. Conversations continue and are ongoing with the Department for Education on a medium-term management plan to reduce the in-year deficit over time, along with some additional funding support. Capital spend is at 94 million, with capital rollover proposals totaling 27 million in the report. This reflects timing issues, slippage on existing schemes into later years. And the report also includes recommendations for capital rollover into future years and proposed use of reserves as set out in the report. On that basis, I move that the recommendations of Cabinet as set out on page 98 be approved.
Because of time constraints, you've got a choice now. Do you want to go beyond 9 o'clock? Because you've got 10 and 11, items 10 and 11 to finish. Items 10 and 11 you need to finish. Or are you going to reduce the number of speakers so that we get them finished? I'm telling you now, I gave you a warning earlier on in the meeting, but you didn't listen to me. So are you going to listen to me now? You want to finish these 2 items, yeah? I'm going to open it up to the debate, but think on. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and keep it, if I can, brief. Firstly, just to thank officers, welcome the report and welcome the work that they've done. And, you know, this has been a difficult period for them because in addition to their day job, they've been trying to manage all of the impacts of the pandemic. But whilst welcoming this, I would have liked to have seen an easier and clearer explanation of the COVID impact on the council. We capture cost pressures, make reference to those, but don't perhaps highlight also the underspends caused by being unable to operate a full range of services due to the restrictions and the justifiable public health concerns. If you look at 1.2.3 through to 1.2.5, and also referencing Appendix 2B, it's difficult to reconcile the figures. You can calculate that our overall cost pressures to the year end were 65 million, which reflects the in-year pressures and the 1.1 million spent in 2019-20. In 1.2.4 and 1.2.5, it states that our specific and unring-fenced funding totaled 68.5 million, which is 3.5 million more than the cost pressures declared. However, you then look at reserves. In section 1.9.7, it shows that at the beginning of last year, we had a COVID reserve of 11.1 million, which was just a timing issue about the receipt of the first chunk of funding. But then, at the start of, we added during the year a further 6.5 million to that reserve. So if our COVID pressures, as accounted for, showed a 3.5 million excess, how did we, by the end of the year, accumulate reserves of 17.5 million? I'm sure this, in part, is due to us not correctly recognising all of the costs we incurred. And in fact, the 17.5 million is probably more related to underspends in other areas because staff had moved out or were unable to operate, rather than an underspend in terms of the impact of COVID. I'd also like to draw the Council's attention to 1.12.18, where again, we can see here's the government delivering on its promises in giving £24.8 million to Dewsbury Town as part of the government's commitment to left behind communities. And I think we should recognise Mark Eastwood MP for the work he's done behind the scenes and in collaboration with the Council to make sure this was delivered. So whilst I acknowledge this report and the work that's gone into it, I do think the presentation does leave it difficult to really understand the real impact on services and directorates from the disruption that the pandemic caused, and do hope that in the future, better clarity could be provided. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will keep my comments brief. It's a shame that we haven't much time to discuss this report, because in my opinion, we don't spend enough time at council talking about figures and budgets. And I can remember when I was first elected and when I was Cabinet Member for Finance, and since then for some years after, the budget round started in September. We had all party meetings all the way through the autumn, culminating in a two-day meeting, a meeting that lasted 2 days in December or early January, where all the finance teams from each party was presented by the officers and by the directors with the budgets. There was then nearly 2 months in order to prepare budget amendments, and then we had a budget meeting which was more or less the set piece of the year. And over the years that has been whittled away considerably, so that now the budget round is nearly non-existent, at least as far as opposition parties are concerned. We get very little notice to be able to prepare any meaningful budget amendments, and when we get to the budget meeting itself, it's largely, I have to say, administration members complaining about how much money they haven't got. This is a far cry from what we ought to be doing, which is looking at these budgets in full. Just a brief comment, and I want to discuss the idea of reserves and the reserves position. Because although the headline is council breaks even, which is laudable, it does conceal some movements in there which we ought to look at. And members will, I'm sure, have noted the bottom line on the reserves, which that they have increased in the year from £115 million to £197 million, an increase of £82 million. Now, before I get carried away with that figure, I do acknowledge that it's been an extraordinary year with the COVID pandemic. It's good to know that the government did meet our shortfall in full, although it hasn't been acknowledged by many in the administration. Some of that grant will be carried over to this year, which we know, but even without that rollover, reserves are still significantly higher. Indeed, the planned movements in reserves, ones that were in the budget to be made as an addition to reserves, were £18 million, came out at £18 million last year. That was money which the administration knew and decided it would put into reserves, and that's the equivalent of a 10% council tax rise or a 10% council tax cut. So the Cabinet has to explain its policy on reserves and its level of reserves. Reserves, they're rainy day money. It's been raining for 18 months and we've still come out with more reserves than we went in. Whilst most of the recommendations in the report we've got before us, Mr. Mayor, are to note this and the other, it does request that we approve the use of reserves, and this I'm not prepared to do. And as such, we won't be supporting the finance report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm just going to allow one more speaker, Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. I've noted the report with this agenda item. Thank you to officers for putting it together. According to a BBC forecast, the UK is set for an uneven economic recovery, with business investment forecast to bounce back strongly in 2021-2022, but drop sharply in 2023. The furlough scheme expires this autumn, and it is predicted young people who work in the hospitality sector may suffer through loss of their jobs. And youth employment, I understand, is predicted to reach 15.6%. This is significant compared to the general population rate of 6%. So the council tax reduction take-up increased dramatically during COVID. It is paramount, therefore, that this council addresses the situation, because young people losing their jobs in the hospitality sector following the end of the furlough scheme could make this spike further. And some proposals need to be in place to deal with this. Some mechanism needs to be in place to deal with this. Some of the council's estate buildings in Huddersfield Town Centre are lying empty. These buildings need to be maintained to attract new tenants. Yet the council has now increased the number of buildings in its estate as part of the Huddersfield blueprint. Some of these shops are lying empty. Shops in the piazza are vacant. And I question the wisdom of buying such buildings in these current times. When will these buildings be filled again? While it is expected that the council will recover the majority of the arrears, I wonder how long this will take. Council tax debts have also increased dramatically. A process of recovery has to be followed, but again, I query, how long will this take? Finally, the council declared a climate emergency in 2018, yet I note the somewhat paltry sum of 4.3 million set aside to tackle this. Is that enough? We declared an emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Right to reply, Councillor Davies.
Very, very briefly, thank you, Councillor Taylor, for your comments. Certainly more than happy to chat about how we could look at this going forward. And I know we've spoken about it previous to this anyway. Just on Councillor Hall's comments, I think he must have missed something in terms of the fact that at Cabinet we recognised the fact that the government have, indeed I made the statement, the government have indeed compensated us for 2020-21. So absolutely the administration has recognised that. So it may have been just something that you missed. And again, thank you, Councillor Munro, for your comments, which certainly take on board as well. Some of which not entirely linked, but I understand where you were coming from. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davies. We will now go to the vote and we'll try show of hands again. All those in favour? Our officers are counting, so I have to wait. Have you written it down? Written it down. All those against? Any abstentions? I am informed that is carried. Item 11. Item 11, there's nothing like finishing things at quick speed, is there? Item 11, page 187, Committee System Proposal, Councillor Hussain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The proposal to go to a strong working cabinet system to a committee system will be considered by the Corporate Governance Audit Committee. As the chair of the CGAC committee, members need to ensure that they carefully consider key issues at each stage in this five-stage process set out by the LGA. And I think it's important that we need to reflect on those 5 key stages because it is a complex piece of work. For instance, planning. What is the purpose of this work? How will you ensure the views of all interested parties are heard, and how will you meet the democratic expectations of your local residents? In terms of the assessment stage, how do you involve all members in the policy document and integrate the public voice? What decisions are delegated to officers, and how do we improve forward planning? In terms of design, developing the principles for what an improved system might look like, member and officer relations, information sharing, and council's roles in performance and management. We then need to consider how we'll get there, what changes in culture and structural changes are necessary, what are the structural options available to us. Then we need to make a formal change. Is there a clear rationale for a governance change? This is a huge undertaking requiring a significant amount of work when rethinking the governance model. Members have a key and central role in leading this process and being actively involved and taking an agile approach in managing, exploring and examining the key issues set out above in that 5-stage process. An implication to consider is the working with other people, such as the council staff, the stakeholders and the wider community, and also the legal and financial implications. There are likely to be resource implications to the review due to the scope of the reviewing governance models, the complexity and timeframe involved. It may be necessary to instruct external support, such as expert advice or additional legal support when undertaking this task. The committee may also recommend actions that have financial implications too, and that's something that we need to consider. Like I said, it's a huge undertaking, and as such, this process will require the involvement of members within the CGAC to meet more regularly for this piece of work. A review of the governance arrangements will need to ensure that the recommendations are in accordance with the Localism Act of 2011 and other relevant legislations, particularly local government acts, and the timeframes included therein. So it is proposed that the CGAC will have the responsibility for overseeing this important and complex area of work in relation to the motion and setting out a timetable to progress the proposal at a future CGA meeting. Can I stress that I've also duly noted that the correspondence that was sent to me by members, and I will be taking their account into serious consideration, and we assure you that your suggestions will be taken on board. Given that this is a significant piece of work being undertaken, I'll be taking note of this debate so it is reflected in the CGAC and discussed appropriately. Can I move that the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee be asked to determine the next steps in accordance with the Local Government Association's key issues as set out at paragraph 2 of this report? Is that seconded?
Is that seconded? Thank you. We've got some speakers, believe it or not. You each get 5 minutes, so you add it up how long it's going to take. Councillor Bolt. Well, I've got a car home, so I'm not in a hurry. Seconded by Councillor Lukic. All those in favour, just to finish this item? Come on. It's not going to take long. Can you count them, please? And me. You want me to do it again? 25, is that?
5.
25.
We'll do the next one. We'll do 4.
All those against? Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Sorry? What are the votes, numbers? What are the numbers? Can I just have the numbers? How many against? How many against? I want the numbers. Sorry? I'm just wait a minute. We're just waiting for the numbers. So that's fallen. There's just wait a minute. 30 against, 25 for. So that's fallen. So we'll move to the vote then. Just that second. We have to do it. Right. Okay. Move to the vote then. Yeah. Okay. So this is the recommendation in front of us. Yeah. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you for your patience and have a safe journey home.